And we're live. Hello and welcome to all of you who are watching live and to the 214 new stakers as of yesterday in the Hex ecosystem. Welcome to Quant Gang episode 45 with Maddie, ALLin, Karim the Dream, FutureUs, and special guests, a qualified quant from Knights of Crypto, Wave3TV, Ruth from Pulse Bridge. Well, she's Ruth is a Pulse Bridge researcher, unofficial advisor, and someone who has a presentation here to give on Quant Gang for the what's going on with the Pulse Bridge situation. And then we might have Dan with an H stop by, who may be the shark that called this dip. So hit the like and subscribe button. We're going to cover not getting hacked, yield versus interest, Pulse Bridges, what happened with the Hex birthday party. By the way, it was a top 5 stream that I've ever done on this channel to do what was going on in New York and in London all at the same time. I streamed for 14 hours straight, and YouTube cut me off at 12 hours. So any of you who are planning to do a 24-hour stream, make sure to refresh at 12 hours. Richard released a new random line today, and we've got much more. So if you're brand new, go to hexcontract.com now to see my playlist to get you up to speed, because these are the advanced topics that we discuss on Quant Gang. And if you don't like it, then get out. I'm going to have the online Hex schedule incoming in the next week, and it's the last week to sign up to speak at the Hex conference, which is going to be happening 1 month from now. It's going to be January 6th through 9th. And so go ahead and sign up at hexsurvey.com to be a speaker. So Ruth, how's it going?
Hi, Maddie. Everything's going great. Thank you for having me on. I love the disclaimer, by the way. If you don't like it, get out. Favorite line so far.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. So, yeah, so we're going to be able to cover everything. I know each of our guests has a certain time frame during which they're going to be able to join. I know Karim is visiting his brother there in Washington, D.C., so he's going to be able to stop by for about an hour. And then I believe we're going to have Wave3TV on the show, who's a quant who came on in the last 3 hours of the 14-hour stream. And so there's a lot of people that are going to be able to join. So welcome to segment 1. Shout out to everybody who's here. Awesome to see you in the live chat. Don't forget to hit the like, says Craig, SigHax, Apex Crypto. What's up, Joe? Hexaking Greenhorn, that's right. Sandy, SigHax. And we have Karim the Dream. What's going on?
Bang. Woo. What's up, everybody? Good to be here. I'm in the lobby. We just finished a workshop here in DC. A lot of people. It was great. Excited to be here. Love to see our guest here again to teach us more again about bridges.
That's
Hi,
right.
Karim, how are you doing?
Doing good, guys. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm trying to be as far as I can from noise, so hopefully it's not too much.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. And I just said basically what we're going to be covering tonight. And so first up, we've got a presentation here. We've got slides to share.
Awesome.
Nice.
And I think I've just revealed the slide. So I guess I'll start at the intro slide. I hastily put these together. And I shared the slides a little while before coming on. And we had a really gracious member of the community point out the typo at the very beginning. So this segment, I guess, we'll call Bridge Bites. And what the goal on Bridge Bites is, well, first I'll cover the TLDR, the TLDW. So feel free to skip ahead if you don't like this. Could be too long. You might not want to watch it.
What's
But
the difference between a TLDW and a TLDR?
great question. So too long didn't read and too long didn't watch. So,
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Awesome.
Nice. And just real quick, the only reason I turn on my camera is because I can put the phone to my ear so I can hear better. So, because I really want to learn about this. So, and
no problem.
thank you
I'm
so
really
much for
happy
taking
to
the
share.
time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me on, and thank you for listening. You know, a speaker is nothing without their listeners. So I really appreciate you guys having me on again. All right.
And thanks to the audience. The audience is crushing it. There were, I think, 1,300 people who responded to the survey about how many people are sacrificing for Pulse Swap. So the community here on QuantGang is definitely the best community in Hex. And we'll touch on that again later tonight. Thanks for being here, guys.
I concur. So this segment is called Bridge Bites, and I'm going to get into the goals of Bridge Bites. There was a little bit of discussion about the name, what the ideal name would be. We have some awesome recommendation. Bridget Jen's Diary. You know, there's some natural extension of this idea with a picture of these two lovely small birds. And so I'm mostly using these slides as a guide to help me have a conversation about this topic. So I'm more prepared than last time at a monologue level. However, this is not scripted, so there will be errors, and call me out on them. That will be awesome. So the goal is to really give the community a chance to consider bridges at an arbitrary level of complexity. So we can go as deep as is necessary. If we have to, we'll talk about electrons. But today we're going to start off at a higher level. And so that's really a 50 or 40,000 foot view, whatever you want to call it. You'll learn about some of the pieces that are important. And we won't drill down too far into the details, but we will touch upon some details that are necessary when it comes to witnessing those details to enable us to understand what we've witnessed. So with every presentation, I like to engage in what's called an empowerment promise. An empowerment promise is really what you'll know at the end of this talk. It also serves to outline the talk as well. So I won't go through all of these points, but I will point out what you've learned so far. And so far you've learned the goal of Bridge Bites, and we'll drill down a little bit more as we go. So the next few slides will really help you establish the necessary schemata for understanding the problem. We'll formalize some bridge notions as well, and once you learn the pieces, we'll go a little bit deeper. So as I mentioned earlier, we're aiming to hide some of the complexity. And that's my goal in this talk. As I mentioned earlier, we can go down to arbitrary levels of complexity if necessary, but for today, I'll try to hide a bunch of information. As you can see in the bottom right, we're probably going to tunnel down to that level by the end of this talk. And I'll have a slide discussing it, so I won't pay further attention to that for now.
Thank you.
So bridges are fundamentally about humans, but they're more than just about humans. You know, these humans are involved with. So they're about humans, but they're also about foreign chains and home chains. So these two terms are networking terms. In general, a foreign chain is something that's expensive. So it's expensive to transact on this chain. And there's also a home chain. Generally, this home chain is really inexpensive to transact upon. So you can think of the home chain as Pulse chain. That will be our future home soon. And you can think of the foreign chain as Ethereum. This is just a small little disclaimer for anyone who's advanced. They just want a quick summary of what's going on. If you're a dev and you know how to read docs, etc., you can just read the sentence at the bottom of this. You can pause it. I'm not going to go into this right now. So in between the chains, the home chain and the foreign chain, the humans actually need a way to interface with those chains. And the way that most of us interface with those chains is via contracts. So humans will interact with the foreign chain via some contracts, and will also interact with the home chain via some contracts. And so a bridge can be thought of as these pieces. You have a foreign chain, you have contracts, you have humans, and you have a home chain. But we actually need to specialize our terminology when it comes to humans. We actually want to partition the space of humans into users and developers. And this is going to be useful for future discussions. And, you know, we've got Richard Hart over there with his badass keyboard. That thing is so cool. I think it's hard to appreciate how awesome that thing is unless you've done a bunch of keyboard stuff. Anyways, completely tangential.
I think it's relevant because I think if we want to appreciate how secure the origin address could be with its private keys, we'd have to consider that Richard Hart has built keyboards from scratch. So
right.
That's pretty secure, right?
I would say that would be an indicator of likely security, if I'm being completely honest, right? So my goal is to just be utterly honest. And I would say that's a great indicator.
My job is to have the perfect amount of hyperbole, but that the audience appreciates that they have been told the truth.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And what I like, by the way, great illustration. I love what you have here. And if that's okay, at some point, I want you to explain to the viewer why bridges also have to have the human involved instead of just having the smart contract, you know, the limitation that Richard was talking about. It would be nice to have a full explanation so people get that part. So
absolutely. I think my presentation should answer that for you. I have a segment that's going to cover admin keys and what we can do to mitigate them. So if by the end of that segment you don't feel satisfied, Karim, please jump in and ask me, and I'll do my best to make sure that you're satisfied.
Perfect. You're doing great, by the way.
Awesome. So we have 2 polls here, and ideally we're going to reach a synthesis. So this sounds great. So now with our specialized terminology of what a human is or what a human could be, I'm going to focus at the user level a little bit. And so I've already touched on this. At a user level, the foreign chain has expensive transactions. So if a user has to interact with contracts, they're going to be expensive on the foreign chain. Similarly, on the home chain, or I suppose contrastingly on the home chain, if the user has to interact with contracts, it's going to be inexpensive. And this sounds trivial. I've already covered it, but it's actually going to be important when it comes to game theoretic considerations at the end. I've included a bonus slide near the end of this that focuses less on technicals and more on some game theory. And I'd really love to encourage the community to comment about that because we are going to read the comments and hopefully we can learn something that we haven't thought of yet. So as I said, I'm not sure if I shared this with everyone, but as I said earlier, I'm using these slides as cues. So when I transition between slides, you might see something that we've already covered. And it might bore you, but you can always fast forward if you're watching this later. So I'm going to encapsulate users and devs again as humans, and the reason is that these transaction costs actually impact both. And we're going to see why that's relevant soon. So at a developer level, the aims of a developer are to minimize transactions on a foreign chain and to maximize transactions on the home chain. Now, we're using terms minimal and maximal here because we can never fully put all the transactions on one chain, but we can approach a reasonable number of transactions such that the proximity between the set of maximum transactions and maximal transactions is very low. So the distance between them is really low. So the implications at a dev level when it comes to contracts, because contract deployment is actually a kind of transaction, is that devs are going to want to deploy a minimal number of smart contracts on the foreign chain, so Ethereum for our purposes, and they're going to want to deploy a maximum number of contracts on the home chain. Now, this isn't always possible. So I'm going to not do a bad job at hiding some of the complexity right now. These topics are worthwhile for future consideration on another episode of Bridge Bytes if you'll have me back. Anyways, but this is some insight into the contracts that need to be deployed on the native chain and the foreign chain, and this isn't an exhaustive list either. But we're not going to get too deep on this. So going back to the empowerment promise at this point, I'll summarize what you know, and you'll have in front of you what's going to come next. So you know the goal of Bridge Bytes. We've exposed you a little bit more formally to bridging, so you know some of the pieces, the roles that devs play, some of the contracts that show up. And in the last slide, you saw a sneak peek at some future possible Bridge Bytes episodes. So when it comes to hiding complexity, we're going to go back to doing that. To deploy all of those contracts, likely on a weekend when fees are the lowest, we've estimated that we're going to need anywhere between 0.4 to 1.2 ETH. I feel like these estimates are reasonable. Might have to stay up late to get it done, but if we're building a community bridge, I think this is within the reach of most community members if they're building it independently. And if we want to solicit the community for donations, we might do that, but we're not ready to do so yet. We would have to set up multi-sig and make sure that donations can't be abused. There's a joke at the bottom, but I'll skip that. So what we're going to consider next are parameters. So this might sound super basic. I assure you it will get less basic soon. But we want to understand the distinction between formal and actual parameters. So formal parameters are more general. They don't have specific values attached. So you can think of a formal parameter as a number. And an actual parameter could be the number 3, for example. So these will come up soon. I can't remember if it's going to be on the next slide, but it should come up very soon. And here it does. So complexity is back. And it's back in the form of showing you some of the parameters that we need to instantiate, or sorry, some of the values that the parameters need to assume. Let's go back. Let's just erase the last 10 seconds. We can edit that out right now, right, Maddie? So I'm just going to show you some of the parameters that are important for deploying the kind of bridge that we need. So the bridge that we're going to need is going to be called an arbitrary message bridge. We're not going to go into what that means at the moment. We will cover that later. And I'm going to highlight some of the parameters that are the elephant in the room, which is related to Karim's earlier question of the necessity for human intervention. So Karim was tiptoeing around the issue, but really what Karim is talking about are admin keys. So I'm going to talk about how to mitigate them, and I'm going to show you why we cannot mitigate them, which is one of the points that Karim made about not being able to exclude humans from, let's call it the loop. So there are some places where we need them, but we can actually take many steps to mitigate the impact that deviant humans might have. So using the parameters from 2 slides ago, I've partitioned their impact. So from the left, we have the, let's think of them as like the least dangerous. On the right, we have the most dangerous. In the middle, we have admin keys that control upgradable contracts, and there are quite a few upgradable contracts. And we're going to zoom in a little bit. Well, before we zoom in on the leftmost parameters, I'm going to just make a clear point that the rightmost parameters are game over. So we're going to mitigate those. We're going to control those. Those are not going to be a problem. And they're so game over that we don't even need to talk about them. You need to know that they can basically do anything, and that we're going to have those handled. And I'm going to tell you how we're going to handle them. The upgradable contracts have mitigation features as well. And the code on the left, it's not actually a bridge contract code. It's just some useful code to help us instantiate parameters. This code will be used to give us some insight into what the admin keys, like the foreign validator owner. So I'm not sure if you can see my mouse. Maddie, can you confirm if you can see my mouse hovering over the 0x right now?
Not very well. A little bit.
All right. So I won't.
You can see, but it's not zoomed in.
Okay. I won't use a pointer, and I'll just discuss it. So column 3, row 3 and row 4. These are admin keys, and we're going to talk about some of the havoc that they can wreak, and we're going to talk about how we're going to mitigate that. So hopefully that shows up on the next slide. Let's see. Yes. Awesome. So what's necessary to understand about admin keys is that you'll see in row 2, under foreign validators owner, that's going to be filled in with an address, and it's going to be a public address. And whoever controls the private keys of that public address is going to be able to control the contract that has this address as a parameter for certain control. What I want to direct attention to is line 128 here. So if it's not clear because it's gray and a little bit hard to see, this line tells the contract, we'll use that terminology, how many validators we can have. So validators change, and this is important because not only do the addresses associated with validators change, but the number of validators change. As time goes forward to further decentralize the bridge, we want more validators. So this number would have to change. And if we remove the admin key from this scenario, we can't change the number of validators. Additionally, one line lower, we insert validator addresses. So if a validator changes, we need to be able to update the new validator's address. And so that's another dynamic element of the system that requires some control from an admin key. Additionally, there's an array of reward accounts slightly below that. And that's the fees. That's where the fees for validating the bridge need to be paid out. So I will make a slight comment. on the terminology of validator that I'm using. The validators for a bridge are distinct from validators for a pulse chain network. Requirements are much lower to validate a bridge in terms of hardware. This should be a sufficient minimal example of why this kind of admin key is necessary. So at a high level, we can view the necessity of this admin key coming in to just deal with dynamic elements of the system. There could be ways to solve this with randomization. So we could have the contract update from a range, and we could have a pool of validators, and we could select from that pool some number based on the randomized range number that was returned. So there are ways to do this, but I will address why we don't want to play around with this too much. So these are options for like a really good future version of the bridge, of this kind of bridge in particular, because there are other kinds of bridge that are possible in theory, but like I said, like we can't build them. You have to design protocols, and there's a lot of work. So we can't build them right now, I should say. So I mentioned there were a lot of upgradable contracts as well, but that would be for a future Bridge Byte episode. There's lots of great ways to mitigate these. I'll discuss how to mitigate these in a few slides, just at a very high level. But I do recognize that this might not satisfy everyone's curiosity. Leonardo DiCaprio is right. Like, we do need to go deeper on this. And as I said, we have the capacity to reach arbitrary depths of complexity. So I'm happy to cover that. So at a high level, admin keys, the problem of admin keys are about control. So admin keys unlock access to control. I'm not sure how many of you remember the scene of Neo and Morpheus entering the Matrix. And there's this woman in a red dress that attracts Neo's attention. And later in this scene, Morpheus discusses how the Matrix is just another system of control. So what's essentially equivalent to control is access to control, right? So the contracts that are in the upgradable set of contracts actually enable access to control as well. And the way that you solve these kinds of problems is by controlling the access to control. So we want to think of this as admin key mitigation. And hopefully the next slide is when you'll see me talk about ways to mitigate access to control and control itself. Okay, the slide after this. So our goal is to protect the user by eliminating or mitigating control and access to control. These are very, very important things. So one way that we're going to do this is by revoking as much of our access to control as we can. We're going to do this with something called ownable. So depending on how technical you are, you might see some code on your screen, and you might see the word ownable, and you're like, okay, well, I know your bridge can get owned. Like, can you tell us how to mitigate that? So what ownable actually allows us to do is to just take away the admin key. So it's used a lot when projects are in an establishment phase. They're setting up the contracts to sort of run on their own, and ownable, once the establishment phase is over, ownable just takes away all the admin keys, which is great. So we're aware of this. So you might think, well, okay, can we revoke everything? And sure, you could. However, A few minutes ago, I believe I discussed dynamic elements of the system. So suppose we remove all the admin keys, and then suppose the dynamic elements of the system need to be updated. Well, we can't, therefore we can't update the system. Therefore the system is suboptimal, and in fact, it could be suboptimal to the extent that it fails completely and is no longer useful, right? So, great, talked about that. So validators are a dynamic element of the system, and the snippet of code that was not actually code or a contract, but really was just helping us to instantiate parameters. That code adjusts validators. And if validators misbehave or they just suck, right, we want to be able to remove them. We want to be able to update the number, right? Like the goal is to decentralize the system as much as possible, and we do that by having more parties. So so admin keys are necessary for controlling dynamic elements of the system. And so a natural question might be, well, can we minimize the number of dynamic elements of the system? And certainly we can, but that's a design thing. And our goal is, maybe I'll address the goal later. So I'll say that's a design thing. So now, can we revoke admin keys for static elements of the system? Absolutely. And you don't just have ownable in this case. You have contracts like Gnosis, right? So Gnosis Safe, multi-sig, etc. You can also write custom contracts, and then you can use things like role-based access control, which is really useful. So we can limit the utility of an admin key on some of the word is not coming to mind, but let me just go back so I use the appropriate terminology. On some of the upgradable elements of the system, and based on the role of the contract, we can, sorry, I misspoke. So based on the desired role of the admin key, we can revoke it on some of the upgradable contracts, which is really nice because the upgradable contracts sit in the danger valley, pretty close to the Ring of Sauron, like do anything and everything. But like I said, the Ring of Sauron case, we just revoke it with ownable, done, problem solved. We don't need to worry about it. So at this point, I think it's a good time to ask Karim if I have appropriately addressed his concerns about why we need to have humans, and really the equivalent of that is admin keys in the system. And so I hope that I've done so by including an example of a dynamic element of the system that must be updated, and that the only way to update it for now is with an admin key. So Karim, I'm not sure if you're satisfied. Hopefully you can advocate for the audience here and let me know if you are, or if you want to drill down more.
Yeah, no, I can hear. I think you did a pretty good job because again, this is very, very high level technical, and I kind of like the memes you drop here and now and then. I think the main idea, which I understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, but basically, again, because even the bridges system is dynamic, and those updates needs to happen. That's why the admin key is there. I guess my hope was maybe a utopian word, but a word where it could just a smart contract could dynamically update those things that the human does. But maybe because it is not always deterministic, so maybe that's why a human has to do it, if that makes sense. But yeah, you explained pretty well why the
That's
need.
actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm so glad that you mentioned the concept of determinism, or really a deterministic system. So right now, the way that bridges are designed and the way the protocols are designed is that they don't really leverage, well, I should be careful here because there's a difference between non-deterministic and and randomization. It's very subtle. So they don't really leverage some of the capabilities that randomization can provide. Now, so here's an example of a limitation of randomization, right? Suppose that we chose validators from a pool uniformly at random according to some number that was also chosen uniformly at random to decide the number of validators that we'd be using for some period. Well, in that case, we would still need to find a way to, let me just make sure I'm thinking along the right lines here. We would still need to find a way to handle, actually, you know, we could handle it with randomization. This idea came to me earlier today, and I didn't pursue it too far, but there's a clear way that randomization might be useful for solving some of the dynamic control issues, some of the control issues over dynamic elements of the system. But I'm not entirely certain, without spending more time thinking about this in depth, whether we could eliminate all human intervention. But I suspect it's possible. I'll have to revisit this. So you're hearing me think out loud, but that was a really great point to talk about a deterministic system.
I guess my question would be,
yeah,
go ahead, man.
I like thinking out loud, and I think that at the end of the day, people who are validators in a proof of stake system are very similar to like liquidity providers in a way. I mean, I know it's very different, but even just the idea of being a liquidity provider, like creates a bridge in a way, right? As long as you're doing it like Uniswap V2, where you put equal sides of liquidity on the actual price. But then I haven't really learned that much yet about how V3 with targeted liquidity has impacted that, because even in the hex system, it's much less of the liquidity on V3 than it is on V2. And with hex leading the way as being paired with USDC, a stable coin, right? That also is something other coins are starting to copy now, which is fine, because like, yeah, that's how you survive the next bear market is
You're learning about bonding liquidity and the Hart's law. You know, again, what was leading the way?
You're uncorrelated.
You copy the best. I think what's fascinating, especially in this concept here with the bridge, is it will be nice to see a world one day where obviously the human factor can be completely removed. But then again, when you're talking about something deterministic, you got to worry about, well, who gets to set the parameter? Like you talk about liquidity, right? Who gets to set the parameter? How much liquidity is enough? You know, enough to support the price, enough to let the price go higher. You know what I mean? Because those are the kind of the things that we have to worry about. Versus if it's done by humans, well, they can take it on and off whenever they feel like it. So it's a tricky question. It's almost philosophical, almost. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah, I have a solution. My solution is for everybody to just send in like they did with the AA. That would I want to hear somebody argue me on how that wouldn't work. Like, of course, it's trustless for the day, or like it's trustful, right? Like, you have to trust whatever length of history there is. Going in on the first day. On any pair, you could make any pair you want and just have even something with admin keys, like just process everything at the end of the day, right? Hit the send button. And I know we're dealing with separate chains, but between Ethereum and Pulse, you're going to have the same private key. And so I've heard people say that like being on separate chains, that makes sense, or that it doesn't make sense. And I haven't messed around on Binance enough to really know, but I would love somebody to say something about that. Basically, the idea that being a liquidity provider like creates a bridge, and if there was, a daily AA send in for any pair of coins, let's say Pulse and ETH, then you could send to the same private keys on both sides of both chains.
Well, yeah, that's one of the reasons why we're gonna have to wait until it comes out so we can, properly speculate while at least getting some facts. I think the key would just be it's always to me at least, it's always about opportunity cost, provided liquidity versus staking, right? If one is better than the other one, clearly that one will dominate. But it's good to have options, and it's good to always run the numbers, and then capital always flow where is the most best treated. It's just that simple rule will always apply. So that's my simple answer for that.
Well, and that's the cool thing with having like a bridge dev here is like, I think we can attest to the fact that there is no trustless bridge technology currently. And so we really are, at the cutting edge, right? Like we are in a lot of things in Hex. We're at the cutting edge of where the game
Absolutely.
theory is, where the economics, and everything. And that's where Hexicans like to be.
Yeah, and what's amazing about the presentation is that I understand now fully that it's due to just the limitation of the technology at this stage until some more breakthrough is found, because it's not for lack of trying, to make the thing fully trustless. Because the way bridges works, you kind of have to have that person, that thing in the middle doing the handshake, so to speak, and then again those deterministic parameters that required to be changed dynamically. So that's why the human is needed. But hey, who knows? Maybe in the future we'll have some special AI and just think it through for us. Just do it.
But that's how it is now with
Yeah.
like I really think the adoption amplifier, which was a smart contract that you sent into, I don't think there were admin keys, but it was basically just a smart contract that you interacted with in the first year of Hex, where however much ETH you put in would get a certain amount of Hex based on what everybody else put in on the same day. So there's a bucket of Hex and a bucket of ETH, and however much ETH you contribute decides what share of the Hex you get for that day. And so the rate per ETH like changed constantly throughout the 360-day launch period, right? So doing a daily send, like I think that's one way to make a bridge. And you don't know how many other people are going to contribute to that pool. But at the end of the day, if there's any arbitrage situation, with things that's how it worked in Hex, was somebody could try to arbitrage. I did that, actually. I tried to do that once just to say that I did it. I was looking at like Ether Delta, which was an exchange that Hex was on before Uniswap came out. And yeah, I forgot to refer myself, so I got wrecked on the trade. I think I lost like $100 worth of Hex back then, which is probably now worth like tens of thousands of Hex. But yes, so there are always arbitrage situations that balance out the market, and and so that's one example of why a bridge could work, even if it's just a smart contract that allows you to send. Wave3TV, welcome to the party.
How's it going, Maddie? How's it going, guys?
Awesome. Bang, bang, bang. Thanks for joining us. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was able to get I'm pretty well caught up with where you guys are at in the discussion. I was able to listen to the stream before hopping on, just running a little bit late for the day. But yeah, thanks for having me on, and it's been a very interesting conversation you guys have had with decentralized trustless bridges.
Exactly right. That even sound like a mouthful, isn't it?
Yeah, it does.
But yeah, no. And I'm glad that you're here, because we can have a good conversation. I haven't seen you in a while, and then also because Phone Game for me is one of my favorite show, and now I'm on the road. I can't be here for 5 hours. We're about to get kicked out of here. But I'm glad
are you still in New York?
No, we in Washington D.C. right now.
Okay.
We're at the workshop. We just finished the workshop. Now they're just doing interviews, so we have the place rented out for another about 20-30 minutes, and then we're gonna get kicked out. But yeah, it's just great. Again, focusing on what matters to me, right? Onboarding, meeting the people, breaking everything down. And what I like about you is you're good with the charts, so you'll be able to go over that as well. But again, about the bridge, it's very fascinating, and I want to get your input on that because it is something obviously that is required, but it's fascinating to see how we're trying our best to how can we make sure we can remove the man in the middle if possible, because we like things that are trustless. But then again, when it's deterministic, there's certain things that I don't want to say require a middleman, but it's hard to do without until some
Yeah.
breakthrough stuff.
I want to defer to Ruth. So how many bridge contracts did you review when you were looking at the research?
Oh boy. Well, before I answer that, I will say there's so much that was just said in the past 5 minutes that deserves a lot of unpacking. I'll put a pause there, and essentially a mental note to get back because there are some pretty intense ideas going on there. To answer that question, and give your new guests some time to speak. And also, I'll just make a small aside of the moment before I finish that sentence. The presentation's not done, but I know certain guests have certain time frames within which they can contribute to the conversation. So we're putting a pause in my conversation, over to Wave3, and then I'll be back to finish things up. So the answer to your question, to finish that thread, is over 100. Some had trivial differences. So some were various versions of the same thing, plus or minus some tiny changes that were irrelevant. But I think the number on the spreadsheet at the moment goes down to 127. There might be a column at the top with just
you reviewed 127 different crypto projects that all claim to use bridges, and you compared them on multiple parameters and cataloged how they stack up next to each other. Is that correct? And then you found that none of them are trustless. So there's no such thing. And that's what Richard Hart described finding as well, is that there's no perfect solution yet to the bridge problem. Is that right?
That's correct. And we only have some in theory, and the theoretical solutions have not been tested in the wild. So they could have problems that are unforeseen to the system designers, emergent properties that could allow them to get owned, etc. So so yes is the answer to that question. You should treat me like a hostile witness, because if you let me talk,
oh, perfect.
I say a lot.
Yes.
So just yes
I've trained for
question.
this. Yeah. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Wave3, have you been around? Have you been in the adoption amplifier in Hex? Do you know what that is?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the adoption amplifier. So, are you trying to relate that somehow as far as bridges? Is that sort of the segue for that?
What do you guys think about that?
So wait, so what's the intention of, like, how would it work, I guess, at the
so you have a pool
yeah,
you have a pool of Pulse and you have a pool of ETH, and at the end of the day you send them to the opposite chains.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, oh, sorry. Do you mind if I make a small comment here? So,
sure.
So
Yeah, no problem.
that's actually enabled by something that Dev Kyle gave a name to, called an ephemeral node, which is actually part of a bridging protocol that has nodes that pop up, and those nodes have spend limits daily. And so when you combine this idea with a kind of iterated prisoner's dilemma, which is what the AA was and which is what Maddie's talking about, it also has Keynesian beauty, contest dynamics as well, irrelevant. So when you combine those, you get a bridge that can transfer things across, but the bridge is suboptimal at like a trustless level. So it's simpler to use accounts. Well, I'll stop talking now. I'm just saying there's a protocol with ephemeral transfer nodes that could be.
Is it trusted beyond what people contribute each day? So let's say that I wanted to contribute 1/10 of an ETH each day, and then I would be essentially like dollar cost averaging in to whatever appetite there is for Pulse at the time, right? And so, what if I kind of just, was doing that behavior and then a bunch of other people were doing that behavior? Wouldn't that still work?
I would argue that the days are, so if we consider trustlessness from a day-to-day perspective, the days should not be seen as independent, right? Because if money is stolen day one, the value of subsequent days approaches zero, right? Because if we can't trust it on the first day, we're unlikely to be able to trust it.
Well, let's say I wanted to sacrifice like 1/10 of an ETH every day forever to
under that scheme,
provide liquidity, let's say.
Right, under that scheme, right, the trust would be up to the trust and the sacrifice itself, right? And so
and then my impermanent loss is just like how many people weren't averaging out of Pulse into ETH the same way I'm averaging in. So it'd be, I'd be taking whatever rate people didn't put into that pool to try to get that ETH out, to try to get that Pulse out. So it'd be like free market.
I would say a really cool way to think of it is your sacrifice enables you to vote on 2 dimensions. So the first dimension is how much you want. So if you put $1 towards moving money towards the Pulse chain from a foreign chain, so you voted in that dimension. So from the ETH to Pulse dimension, the second dimension is where you might want your sacrifice rewards, potential rewards, right? To be allocated, and you could choose to allocate those rewards on Ethereum, or you could choose to allocate them on Pulse chain. And so if your goal is to move economic energy into the Pulse chain, it might not be a bad idea to actually reward yourself, to vote to reward yourself on Ethereum with the knowledge that you have already voted towards money being able to move towards Ethereum. Towards Pulse chain. And then you get those funds to doled out to be able to basically, that description needs a little bit more background. So
I would have to mint it from like both sides probably, right? But then again, there would be more of a penalty to go to ETH. And so that would be more consistent with the type of vampire attack that's happening in general, which is just, it's a matter of not only the liquidity that's set up when the bots go through and equal the price of everything. Have we talked about have the last 3 hours of the stream that we did with Wave3 and I for the 14-hour stream got cut off of YouTube? And we talked about some pretty important stuff during that segment. So I'll probably have to post that again. But the idea is one way that the Pulse chain could launch, which I think Richard alluded to, although maybe I just made it up or something, right? Is this idea that when you first give people their PRC20s, you could permanently lock a certain percentage of them into a liquidity contract that pays out Pulse swap tokens. And so it's a one-time event that occurs, it launches, right? But the automated bot makes sure everything starts at 0 for tax purposes, and then a day later, then it goes through and it matches the prices of everything. And
in that case, we'd be looking at meta bridging via a sacrifice. Sorry, I got my concepts confused because we had a discussion about something similar a while back. So,
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Maddie, it's going to happen automatically because, like Richard said, it's to make sure that they cannot stop the show to be played. whoever owns the contract, let's say other tokens on the other chain, yeah, they can decide to nuke it if they want. But if they decide to come or let it play and let the game be played, the moment the game starts, the game cannot be stopped because the harvesting is going to happen to create enough liquidity so the thing doesn't go to zero and it continue to play with whoever is still there to play. Even if there's some of the players decide not to play, those who want to play there, they can go. And this is where that liquidity injection comes in. And the Pulse Swap token is just the reward to create the liquidity injection that we need. And then after some dance, as we know, it could take a couple weeks, a month or two, whatever, parity is going to be found. And then from there, it's going to, kind of take off from there. And I think the Hex token is going to lead the way because obviously this is the one that has the most value right off the bat. But this is why it's so genius and it's exciting to see what's going to happen. My only worry about bridges, which we touched on earlier and briefly, it's just the admin key factor of, what if you put the money there and then you expect to get something on the other end, but then where the money that you're putting first, if it gets hacked for whatever reason, and that reserve gets drained, then whatever you own on the other side becomes valueless because the thing that was backing it up has been drained. Does that make sense? That was my only fear.
It's
why
not big, but like in reality, it's not that big of a risk because I mean, you already have validators that are stopping double spends and like doing the honest thing.
Yeah.
And
no, absolutely. No, that was just the thought process
just have a
behind
smart
it.
contract that works like the AA that just distributes at the end of the day on both chains. Like you could trust that. Maybe you wouldn't put more than $1,000 worth on there at any given time, but that also like creates kind of a liquidity, filter to stop people from jumping off all at once.
Absolutely.
Kind of,
and the funny thing is, I agree, and it makes a lot of sense. This is just me just making a comment saying it will be maybe it's a little greedy of us to have that trustless trust because we can sit there and talk about it how great it is because we believe it. It's not going to have a problem, but it's good to have trustless trust because somebody doesn't have to take my word for it because they know that optionality is just not there for the worst case scenario to happen. So, but it's good to know that at least we're trying our very best, and who knows. When a lot of smart minds put themselves together, you know what I mean? Innovation always comes. So, but Wave3, what do you think about all this? I want to hear you. I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. So the conversation on decentralized bridges, it's so this has been it's a pretty I would say just in general in the market the bridges is just an issue that pretty much everything has everywhere in the market. There isn't, as stated, there isn't a decentralized bridge that exists. And if somebody is really concerned about it, pretty much if you want to have the least amount of impact to the decentralized bridge, then you can just hold whatever the native assets are on the root chain. So in the case for Pulse token, just hold all of that on Pulse chain. On the Ethereum side, you have Ethereum, and then in the case for Hex, the system state already gets rolled over, so you already have the native assets on both sides. I would say the only risk, at least on my mind, is where you start to move liquidity from other assets, like from other chains, over into Pulse chain. But it sort of just depends on what your objective is. I would say at the end of the day, like the whatever the native assets are on that root chain tend to dominate the entire network. This is likely going to be true on Pulse chain. You see this across all the other L1s that exist across the market. So you really only inherit the risk if you're basically starting to move around whatever assets are that are not native, in my opinion, to that chain. Because like in the case for these bridges that exist, there's any swap that exists in the market where you can move value from, let's say, Ethereum to Phantom to Binance Smart Chain. But if you were to end up on Binance Smart Chain, you can just end up with the native asset as BNB token. And it's the same thing on Pulse. Like if your end goal is to get Pulse and P-Hex, then those are native assets. And if you hold those on the root chain, then the risk is zero. There is no risk. So it's only in the event for the assets that start to get, you know, bridged back and forth. And this is just an issue across the entire market. So it's not really, you know, it's not really a negative on Pulse Chain because this problem exists everywhere. So, you know, it's one of those things where at some point, perhaps there is a solution that exists that then is adopted by Pulse Chain or the community.
Hex user is unaffected by not being on the cutting edge of everything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Hex users
no,
are not affected at all. You're right.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what you just said, 100%. I mean, literally, this is the same conclusion that I derived, and I have a good analogy for the viewers. You know, keep it simple, quick math is, I use it and I'll treat it just like I treat the exchange. You know, just like I treat public restroom. Just go in and out, right? You only leave there what you're okay with, just because meat, right? You know what I'm saying?
That's
Think about it,
perfect.
right, Maddie? If you
That's
think
a
about it,
really good
technically, right?
analogy, actually.
When you hold your money in your own private account, your staker wallet, all that good stuff, what do? Do we put a lot of money on the exchange? No, we just put just enough to transition the bridge, which is to go back to fiat. Make sense? So let's say I need a quick 10K for whatever reason, then I can just send to the bridge, aka the exchange, which technically has an admin key, right? Because they can log me out, they can do whatever they do, right? And all this sort of stuff. But I can just send what I need, do my stuff, transfer to fiat. If I gotta pay something, boom, and then be done with it. So for the viewer, understand that analogy and what Wave3 just explained, which is perfectly correct, because that is, to my humble opinion, after synthesizing all the information that I've know about this so far. And thank you again, Ru, for breaking it down, because that's important, you know, with the visual aid and everything. So we get to understand what the risks are, what can be changed, and how to mitigate so that we can always be protected. So if something were to happen, God forbid, knock on wood, I got woods next to me right here, then it's gonna be something small, not something big. So the more we understand what we're dealing with and how the bridge works, the more we're gonna be able to educate people on how to use it, so they don't end up having a bunch of it just, you know, sitting there for no reason, because that brings like honeypots and stuff like that, and that's when, you know, hackers shows up.
So before we continue on this tangent, I feel compelled to make a comment. So first of all, it's a smart strategy to de-risk in the native chain asset. Makes perfect sense. You bridge, you expose yourself to risk, then you swap it out immediately for the native chain asset. However, where are you going to get your liquidity from? So there's this problem that we refer to as, we don't refer to it, it's just a reality of the circumstance. It's liquidity fractionation. This is different. This is distinct from fractional reserves, etc. Suppose you're using several bridges, let's say 3 bridges. Each bridge is going to have its own token. You get to the chain, and then what? Some bridges are going to have pools with liquidity. Some bridges are going to have liquidity pools with the native token, and the prices are going to be okay. Others are not going to be as okay. Others could be terrible. Others could be great. So it's not just an issue of transient exposure to risk and then de-risking in the native asset. You actually need to use a popular bridge. So this mention of any swap, I'm just going to cut that in the bud right now. So it's trustless up to a private settlement network. That's like pretty damn bad. Okay, let's not talk about trust swap anymore. It fucking sucks, is my honest opinion. So we need to be considering how to minimize liquidity fractionation. I also said that I wouldn't talk shit about bridges. That bridge sucks ass in particular. So fuck you, any swap. Come at me, bro.
Hey, speak that truth, man. Speak that truth. You know, we trust honesty out here. So Richard does the same, and it's hilarious. But this is what needs to be said, because if you can back it up, you know. But a quick comment on what you said is absolutely true in terms of the popular bridge, and I think this is the reason why the community, if we end up doing, you know, Pulse Swap or whatever the name is because, you know, again, to me in my book, right, Richard has street credit. So if I got multiple options, I'm going to go with the option that Richard chooses because I know he's going to do his due diligence and we're going to make sure that it's done correctly. And then as a community, Hexicans, we're going to pool the liquidity together to get it done. But I think you're absolutely correct. You know, we don't want to have that fractionation because imagine Uniswap V2 was fractionated and the liquidity is everywhere. We wouldn't have the strong resiliency that the pair of USDC has if we were, you know, if the liquidity was fractionated. So that's a great comment. Just want to say that.
Right. So on a high level, de-risking with the native, really smart idea. In practice, it's going to lead to fractionation, which is a problem. And it's actually a problem that we're aware of and we're trying to solve it. And the way that we're going to solve it is by influencing the circumstances. So by circumstances, right, we're in a really decentralized system. So one way to influence a decentralized system is to kind of go beyond the system itself and impact communication. So we have the opportunity to preclude this problem of fractionated liquidity, crappy prices, and perhaps it's impossible for individuals to de-risk. Because let's suppose you go across a bridge, you get bridge token B. Well, cool. You don't have Pulse, and no other person who used bridge B has Pulse either. Therefore, liquidity doesn't exist on the chain. Therefore, you're never de-risking. So cool story, bro. Or at least you're never de-risking at the level that we discussed by de-risking with a native asset. And let's be frank. If there's no liquidity for the native asset with that token, you're not de-risking with some other token, right? It's
so because this is a launch it's the biggest airdrop in history in the sense that, you know, this is all being given for free to Ethereum holders. We could still make up any rule we want, right? Like whatever Richard approves, right? Or whoever is, the collective, right? The social consensus could say that we need to lock 99.9% of all PRC 20 tokens, right, in liquidity contracts, and then the prices of everything just go wild, right? And then you're earning your pulse swap. Well, maybe that's not the ideal ratio, right? Maybe the ideal ratio is 66%, right, lock, or a 33%. But there's probably going to be some ratio that really protects the entire system, but also gives it value, because if people have to interact with the system over time, they're going to prefer it. It's going to vampire attack the rest of the Ethereum network. And so that's a really powerful move.
So I also want to make a comment before I get a ton of messages like, LOL, bro, you said that there are no trustless bridges. Here's 20 of them. So we're talking about trustlessness up to something. So you can order a bunch of toys up to height based on some other dimensions. But that doesn't mean that whatever you've ordered them up to is like a qualifying dimension. So that barely made any sense. I'm just going to give an example. Any swap is trustlessness up to the private settlement network. So it's trustlessness except for this giant, disgusting private settlement network. All right. So, okay. And they use rhetoric like this to claim that they have a trustless protocol, etc. Maybe AnySwap isn't doing this, but I just mean they in general. A lot of bridge projects do this in general. They claim decentralization up to some like sub-entity of their system that's isomorphic with other sub-entities and so on. Like
AKA they lie.
You know, I have to be honest. It's technically not a lie if they're clear, right? If they're clear, we're trustless up to X.
But in the marketing, they don't say that. In the marketing, they're being dishonest, in my opinion.
Are you saying they're giving you a white lie? Portion of the truth.
I would call it
That's the truth
paltering.
and not all the
So
truth. You know what you're saying?
paltering is a great word for people to know. And I think we'll just let people Google that. It's paltring. It's a way to skirt the truth without lying. And it's a very subtle thing that you should look out for because that's how people lie to you. So beware of paltering. If they say it's trustless, the immediate question is trustless up to what? Trustless up to your private settlement network that we can't trust? Like, what the hell? Right? Like, it's trustless up to trust itself. Okay, so we can't trust it at all. Awesome. Cool story, bro. Technically not false. You're paltering. The claim that you made in your paltering statement is technically true, but it's not useful in any way. So it's
very
essentially a
important what you
truism.
just said, because to me that's the key. Because when they do that and they're not being honest from the get-go, whatever left of trust that was there is gone. Because we understand, and I've said this all the time, software is hard. I repeat, software is hard. We're not going to sit here and pretend that this is easy. But be honest with people. Let them know, because then they get to assess their own risk and decide what they're going to do. So, hey, when you do this, it's what you're going to get. You know what I mean? That's what I always love with Richard, right? He always lets you know, we're here for the mad gains. This is the agenda, but dips are in the game, right? Those are the risks. But understand that in the balance of probability, blah, 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 X, Y, and Z, if you delay gratification, this is where you're going to end up. So it's all about that full disclosure. I've been in professional sales for a long time. Like, disclose everything. Life is a risk. I mean, shit, breathing is a risk too. You know what I mean? But just disclose it with people. Don't pretend that you're going to do something you're not going to do. Or don't pretend that something is something that it's not. Because people are going to take that to heart, believe that it's going to happen, and then when the shenanigans comes in, then of course they're going to be upset because you said something and then something else happened. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I have a question on the this is maybe for another tech stack that exists in the market. All I know is the utility of it. I don't know the technical detail, whether it's like actually trustless. So I know around like Tendermint, they use what's called IBC, which is their version of chain-to-chain messaging. Is that in practice? Do you know if that's actually secure at all, or do you inherit a lot of risk the moment you move an asset from like the root chain over into like another chain in that tech stack?
So it fails at the level. So it's like one of the worst protocols, actually.
Okay.
It's so and I'll justify it because like I don't like just he's an authority. He said yes, like done. Like that's not cool to me. So it fails at the level of atomicity, which breaks down into liveness and safety. So I can, and it actually, so you can print fake money, and your stuff doesn't get there if you want it to get there. There's no guarantee that the transaction you wanted to have happen will happen. So that's the preceding one. The immediately preceding one is liveness, and the one before that is safety. So I will happily link a document that describes the failures of IBC, and there are many. So at a lower level than just the atomicity concerns, we end up with so trust and everything just essentially defaulting to the source network. So IBC, you're referring to something that starts with the main player in this space that I appreciate that you didn't mention. It starts with a C and it ends with an S, and I don't know, 6 letters, 5 letters, somewhere in there. So I do know what you're talking about. Not worth mentioning. It's just not good. So maybe I'll share a paper in the chat that discusses it. There's so many problems. It's like one of the worst ones, but yeah. So we'll just leave it there.
What does their marketing say?
So like,
Uh,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
You know, I honestly don't know or remember because I cut through all the marketing bullshit super fast to find their docs and their code and their architecture. So sometimes I can't answer that question.
No, that's fine. Wave3TV. What do you think their marketing says?
Yeah, so the one, I guess the one that Sunlayer is mentioning, so that's like a specific one within that whole tech stack, the one that ends in S, and then I would say the community that's around, it's kind of different compared to most shilling you see on crypto Twitter. So I'll give them that, but at the same time, it's hard to tell, like, to really understand what the security trade-offs are unless you're basically a developer that's actively, working close to these protocols, because they're mostly just trying to they're not really, to be honest, like, that community isn't the very best when it comes to like marketing and selling things. So I think they're sort of more just lackluster in that category kind of naturally. So there's at least that. But in terms of like the actual practicality of it, the security aspects, what are the real security trade-offs once you start to go cross-chain? That is something that nobody in this market knows their ass from their elbow unless
It's
it's a
just
developer. Yeah.
no, I mean, it's just it's while you're making
Yeah.
the transfer, right? I mean, and then at the end of the day, like even if you wrapped something, you like left value behind, and like now if you want to go get it, it's basically like doing another trade. So whether you consider yourself, I mean,
Yeah,
So
it's
do you mind if I make a quick comment just on what you said? It should take 30 seconds or something like that.
okay. Yeah,
please.
sure.
So what we've just witnessed is insight into the user model of bridges. Most bridge users don't care how it works. They just want to get from point A to point B. Now, because we know that that's not the best model, what we have here is an opportunity to update that model for many users. And we can direct them to a better solution. So I 100% agree with what Wave just said.
So
Most
like
users have very naive models.
Yeah, validator takes like a package of transactions, and just like approves it, right? Because they're trusted to stop double spends, right? So that's simple computer code being run. I don't see why, sending crypto to another chain that uses the same private and public keys, I don't see how that would be that much different in terms of, just being able, I mean, you're still trusting to some extent while you're sending, but after you send, it's like, it's over. You got what you got. It's like a free market.
I don't know if that's a meaningful, sorry, Maddie. I don't know if that, sorry for what I'm about to say. I don't know if that's a meaningful statement to say that the chain, so chain A and chain B, so the foreign chain and the home chain, them both having the same keys. I don't know if that's
well, yeah, I heard somebody, making a case against tax somewhere or against Pulse or something, and they're saying something like that. I mean, so yeah, please do tell what the
that's just weird. It seems like an almost irrelevant detail. I would say, like, from the user flow perspective, that saves time and reduces complexity. But yeah, I don't know. It just seems to me orthogonal. I'm curious to know what that person's arguments were, but that just sounds like completely irrelevant and dumb that person is talking about it.
But it's like what happens whenever there's a fork anyway, right? I got Bitcoin and I got Bitcoin Cash. Like, those are two separate things. And I kept the same private keys, right? And I have stuff in cold storage that still has yet to claim that fork, right? But that's the difference between an airdrop and a fork. Is an airdrop, sometimes there can be a time limit, like Uniswap, 1inch, all these platforms. If you haven't claimed your ENS tokens, they're worth like $10,000 right now. If you ever had an ENS name that you held on to for more than a day. And well, in the last 5 years, at least, they go back even further. But yeah, there are a lot of important
Maddie, are you saying you did good with
differences
the
yeah, I got Maddie.eth and I got QuakeKing.eth probably. Those are some key ones.
Congratulations, bro.
Yeah, thanks, man. Molly and I spent like thousands of dollars chasing airdrops. So, it feels good to get repaid on some of those. But I would just recommend to people, not necessarily to chase airdrops. It's not
Yeah,
always the best
definitely
thing,
do not.
except for Pulse.
I
But
repeat, do not do that with your Dream account. Do not go connecting that shit some
Correct.
random places. Do not do
Yeah, you can
worth
you
it.
can get in trouble too.
But congrats on the .eth thing. So I know you had
Yeah. Hex was an airdrop once upon a time. And
it was a Richard Hart head drop.
Yeah, it was time limited, right? And
security.
And so it had a lot of game theory behind it. And so being able to recognize, what's an airdrop and what's a fork, and then to be able to say, yes, this is going to have value. Like, it doesn't matter if some person on the internet says like, oh, that doesn't have value because the private key is technically something else. Well, no, it's the same private key, and it does have value because of the game theory that surrounds it, right? That's why Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin became separate assets. Bitcoin Cash split off then to Bitcoin SV. I guess Craig's right. One is case this week.
Airdrop is valuable. It's just a matter of there's scams out there that you're chasing an airdrop, and sometimes you connect your wallet to some random place, and then you show up the next week and it's drained. So that's all I was trying to say. Just like be careful. But
Correct.
if it's a trusted party, even though it's hard when you use the word trust, but as long as you're doing I'm sure you are smart enough to create a brand new wallet, separate, make sure if something goes wrong, you're not gonna be drained. So I just don't want Hexicans and people watching Quang Gang to take that gamble. Oh, I got a bunch of coins because of so and so, and then you're gonna go connect your wallet, and then bad thing happens. Like, it's not worth it.
Yeah, just wait.
Get your copy. Stay, date, and chill. That's it.
Just wait and find out from streams like this. Ask the other 100 streamers in Hex, and develop your trust with the information that people provide, and then you take your own risks, like we're saying, and make your own decisions.
What's your thought on those airdrops? Am I being too paranoid here, or does that make any sense?
No, it makes sense. Like, it's anytime you interact with some other contracts on Ethereum, you do inherit. Most people sort of recklessly handle their wallets too, because by default, when you give these contracts allowance to spend your funds, most people basically leave the default, which is basically an infinite spend because the number's so high. So I think that's where most people are likely to run into issues with some of these contracts. And then I don't know if we've seen any major exploits from that, but that's something I wouldn't be surprised to see later on, where somebody gives a contract approval for the funds in their wallet, and then now that contract can spend the funds, assuming there's like an admin key in the background.
We could even give the admin keys. Tell me if I'm wrong. We could give the admin keys to the actual Pulse validators, and so the people who actually have a stake would be basically, they would have the ability to run away with everybody's $1,000 that they put in max. Let's just say it's not hard coded in, but I wouldn't put more than $1,000 for a day to swap in and out of something that wasn't completely trustless. But like, I can trust Pulse validators as far as I can throw them. I know David Feeder. I know he's a good guy, right? Like they're already catching double spends within the entire network. Why couldn't we risk
I think the bigger problem, Maddie,
our
is not
funds
that.
there in a
I think the
bridge?
bigger problem is not that, because having trusted member in the community, to me, that's a given. I mean, that's the reason why I even invested in the thing to begin with. So my trust is
Yes.
already there. The biggest problem is that not having to deal with the ramifications. Because I give you an example. Excuse me, Staker app, same thing. We have the trust of the community because we work hard to earn that trust. But if you were to ask me, do I want to have the risk, you know what I mean, to be custody, this and that, then I'll probably tell you no. I like the fact that it's non-custody because I don't have to worry about it, you know, so I can sleep better at night. Because you can mean well, you can be a good person and blah, 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 but you can still get hacked. And that's what Richard Hart talks about.
Yeah.
We're not saying those people are bad people. That's further from the truth. It's the fact that it's a honeypot potential. So obviously, if we don't have another choice, But if it's possible, so everybody can sleep better at night and be kind of like automated or non-custodial or whatever, that would be a dream come true. You know what I mean? So I can remove myself from the equation. I love the trust, but if I can go trustless, I will always choose trustless. One less thing to worry about, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you can get pretty close. Because like, look at the flush address, right? Like that was another part of the adoption amplifier mechanism. And the flush address, like just moved funds every so often or every day. I'm not sure what the code was for that. Maybe Dev Kyle would know more about that.
Yeah, it was kind of like automated. But the cool thing about that was, I mean, it's fun to move anyway, because that was set disclosed from the get-go. You get what I'm saying? The issue with when you do a bridge or even as a validator, because, you know, obviously Staker I will plan to be a validator as well on the Pulse chain. But
really,
there's certain things that, yeah, well, we announced it, yeah, because why not? We're here for the community long term, so it just makes sense. You know, obviously, you know, software is hard. But ideally, again, one-stop shop. You get everything there all in one. You get all your copies all in ones. And now you can do Pulse chain directly there. It's going to be a win-win-win. So you're going to be good to go. So, guys, this is the funniest thing. Hold on a second. I'm like, my brother just got here. I haven't seen much.
Hey.
Hey. He's a Mexican too, all right? I did my job. He just showed up from work. Come on. Right.
Hey, what's going on?
Good, yourself? Introduce yourself. Oh,
good.
My name, I'm Karim's brother, Kadir. You know, hi. When you got into Hex? You know, people think we're bots out here, so, you know. A year and change ago. Nice. And how's that going for you so far? No complaints. No complaints. You heard that, guys? No complaints. Did he do a fairly good job for you so far? So far, like nice. I said, no complaints. And what is your out of the whole mechanism beyond the price going on? What is your favorite thing about Hex that you like the most? Is it the staking? Is it the? I just wanted to get a feedback here for the community. Okay. Only a couple hundred people watching. Put me on the spot, but okay. Of course, on the spot is the best. I would say I don't have to worry about it. I mean, it's all about the trust thing that either you commit or either you don't. You know, and I'm just looking for ways to diversify my investments. Bang bang. And you know, if you can afford it, just put a couple, some money that, you know, whatever it's appropriate at your level, and you know, trust the process, and that's it. Woo! I mean, what's the difference between, you know, putting your money in a CD and that? I mean, in a sense, they're similar, not the same, but a similar system mindset. Yeah, that's it. Damn, guys, you heard it first here from the older brother right here. I look up to this guy for so many years. You have no idea. Oh my goodness, you can't make this shit up, people. I had to put him on the spot, so you know it's real. You know, people think we're bots, and I tell you, I got my family involved who think it's a joke. But he literally just finished work, and it was perfect timing. We're about to get kicked out of this place. But yeah, I want him to say hi. My sister too. She's gonna be in the documentary. But I love what he said. He doesn't have to worry about it. Hardworking, doing his thing, living his life, being a family man, and now the games just work. So shout out to your community. So yeah, just wanted to say that real quick. Maddie, thanks.
Awesome.
But yeah, we only have a few minutes. I'm probably gonna have to hop off, and then you guys will have to continue. I'll just watch you guys from on the stream because we have to go. But yeah, I want to thank every single person to being here. As always, we're on the tour. I'm on the mission. It sucks because I love Kwang Gang. I like to be here for 5 hours, but when you're on the road, it's hard. But we don't make excuses. We just make it happen.
Look what I got today.
What you got? I can't see.
It's an Illinois license plate that says out of hex.
Oh, yeah. I saw your tweet. That was epic. But, dude, out of hex. You know me, Maddie. I showed you. You know, it's on the blockchain. So we're saying the same thing. We're saying the same thing. We're here to stay. But yeah, Roof, thank you for the breakdown. Which to continue the presentation. Wave 3, good to see you all the way, family. Vegas 2.0, you already know what we're going to do. And community, much love. I'm going to continue to watch. I'm going to be in the background because we have to get out of here. But yeah, great show. Thanks for taking the time for being here today. So I appreciate you all.
Kareem, before you go, can both brothers do the bang bang thing?
That'd be great.
Both you guys do it at the same time?
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna ask you. That's a good one. One of my hold on. I gotta break this down for him. One of my favorite things I say all the time is bang bang in the producers. So I want you to say that on stream for the career. Just so it looks like me too. Come on, we'll do fun. Oh. Hey, you heard it first. He's a chop chop guy. I'm a bang bang guy. So, boom. Oh, I got Hexagon 720 with me right here. Say hi.
What's up, Kwang Gang?
Hey, what's going on?
What's up?
Hey, good to see you.
You too, man. You too. Doing big things out here in DC.
Hell yeah. You
Next
guys
stop
rock.
is gonna be North Carolina, Charlotte. So we'll keep you guys posted. We had a great number of people here today, and hey, spreading the love, man. Hex.com, one and only, spreading financial freedom. Mwah. Much love.
And then on Tuesday, it's Atlanta.
Yes, after that, well, I'll find a way. I will never miss an episode. Committed, whatever it takes.
Awesome.
No excuses. All right, guys. Peace out.
Bang, bang.
Bang, bang. Chop, chop.
Awesome.
All right, so I've made a note to myself to shut up temporarily so that Wave 3 can get a word in. And I'm still around, but I'm not going to say anything for a bit.
Yeah, let's go completely with any direction Wave 3 wants to go with this episode.
All right, I'll just let's see. I guess for the bridge stuff, I mean, that is very useful. I mean, because in practice right now, as far as like speculators in the market, those are just users. So when it comes to at least on the technical side, most people aren't going to understand basically the trade-offs, and then just kind of the reality that there isn't, this trustless bridge that exists yet in the market. So yeah, I would say basically de-risking into the native assets is really valuable, especially if there's liquidity to do that. There is the liquidity concerns that Sommelier has with regards to the bridging and that getting split up. So the cross chain part is very difficult right now, and so far from what I've seen, it to me it's just becoming more clear that whatever the native asset is of the root chain, that seems to be pretty much the way to go until there's more out there on the cross chain side. So that is really valuable, by the way, Sommelier, even understanding on the IBC side, because I know there's ecosystems within that network that are experimenting with that kind of stuff. So I was curious what, if there was a nuke that happened within IBC, what that would look like. So that just helps me better visualize that worst case scenario.
An example I can give you is beyond a 7-day period, I believe. So I don't have my notes on the protocol, and I last looked at the protocol at an academic level months ago. But beyond, I believe, a 7-day period, based on certain data that's transferred and stored, and the way that it's transferred, the kind of Merkle proofs that are done on it, it's possible to fraudulently submit a proof, and that leads to a safety violation, which from the user perspective is simply thought of as free money or like fake money circumstance. So it's just one of the exploits. What the protocol does well is they are decentralized. So I'll give them that, but there's flaws in the protocol itself that are exploitable and that fail at a MISP level.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is there actually anything in the market that's useful to build off of as a developer in terms of what exists for cross chain, or is that still just pretty much a wide open field right now where there just hasn't been any good base to sort of build off of? Because I know the whole multi-chain narrative or whatever, but to me it's still native assets to me are personally the only ones I'm comfortable holding on to. But I guess as a developer, is there really anything useful out there for cross chain, or are we still at the very early stages of a proper protocol being developed for any chain to chain messaging?
So there's a lot of so as far as like build off of and useful, I don't want to sound belligerent, but those are suitcase words in a sense.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we'd have to decompose them a little bit more. So my assessment is that in the academic literature, so we're talking about cryptographers here at universities, there may be a few architectures that could lead to a trustless, decentralized, cross-chain communication world. Now, what we're using, in relation to your comment about build off of, I'm going to describe the architecture that we're using for our bridge a little bit later, plus an extension to it. So the extension could be thought of as a way of building off of it. And both of these are solid, are as solid as we can get at the moment, without inventing new things that are. So there are things, and I'll showcase one, and it's been audited by Chain Security, which is the same firm that also audited Hex. So stay tuned is my answer, without dominating more of the conversation.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Okay, yeah, I would certainly be interested in learning more on that, I guess, as you learn more. Just because the information that exists on it, just in general, it's kind of it's almost like a lottery in a way, as far as what people sort of subscribe to as far as an idea. Because truthfully, most people they're not going to understand this kind of stuff, and I'm sure it's going to be relevant, definitely relevant at some point. I mean, we're still pretty early with the whole chain to chain aspects of it. I would say it really starts to become a much bigger concern after Ethereum just got totally unusable. So, now that Ethereum is sort of wrecked from a usability standpoint, I've seen other other things kind of pop up, and to me, it's kind of Maddie was suggesting on the market. Sorry, what were you going to say, Maddie?
Think about when Uniswap was created. when it was invented, when this beautiful new invention that's like just as great as Bitcoin itself is just this decentralized, right? Like market maker that holds liquidity together, right? Through a smart contract that's trustless. And you hold your private keys in, you can yield farm and et cetera, et cetera. Ethereum was already a place where fees got too high because of CryptoKitties, right? Like CryptoKitties and malinvestment and speculation like pumped Ethereum all the way to 1,400, right? From like 10 cents. And that's stupid. That makes no sense. And so, of course, Ethereum dropped down to like $80 or $90. Richard called the bottom, launched Hex. Then automated market, automated market makers, right, were invented. Uniswap was launched like what, 3 months, 6 months into when Hex existed, I think. And of course the chain is clogged up and like crumbing now, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and that's because right now, I guess, I mean, Ethereum is gonna suck to use for a very long time. And in terms of their roadmap, like I do give merit to any, it's if we're gonna talk pumpamentals, that's like a separate conversation. But in terms of usability, it's just not gonna happen for average users for Ethereum. And there's just a certain way they're going about the roadmap, which is fine, but at the end of the day, there's a lot more speculators in the market today compared to 2017. And as Maddie mentioned, even CryptoKitties back in 2017 managed to briefly clog up the network, but now it's basically indefinite with the amount of speculators that exist today. So the native assets, like the way I view crypto when it comes to the native assets, is basically bull markets in cryptocurrency in a nutshell, mostly boil down to degenerate gambling on a bunch of alts people are firing at on dexes, all sorts of stuff. So if you pick the correct assets in this market and you just hold on to them, your bags are basically getting pumped from everybody else like gambling their money. So that's sort of the nature when it comes to how crypto has evolved so far. And if that's sort of the roadmap to being a like a good store of value in the future, I'm all for it. It's just sort of being objective to that kind of reality. And that's why the native assets for me are just the way to go, because time and time again, like we see this every cycle. Anybody that tends to take very lopsided bets versus whatever the main native assets are tend to bleed out versus those assets. Like it's in the charts, and people just like to try to fight. They try to fight math, they try to fight reality, and then they end up losing. So if you're looking for sustainability, native assets are definitely the way to go. And then just from a usability standpoint, since there's obviously going to be a lot of work that gets done on these bridges with time, if the native asset for de-risking is a good strategy, and hopefully you have some liquidity to do that easily. I could say, just out of experience, I only briefly used AnySwap just to see, from a usability standpoint, and I did run into some of those liquidity issues trying to get from one chain to another. So that does even exist with AnySwap. I don't vouch for the protocol. I mostly just used it as sort of a baseline. But
is that because you had to swap into like something that was unknown, or like was getting ready to be rug pulled in order to like bridge your own value across that network?
Not so. Fortunately, it wasn't anything like that. I was mostly just trying to see, like, is it possible to get easily from Ethereum over to something like Binance Smart Chain, for example, like to try to get like a native to get the native asset on that side. Like, how easy is it to do? Mostly just so I know how to do it if anybody asks like a question. But
yeah,
it's not something I actively like. The experiment was like, can I easily get from the Ethereum chain over into BNB? And then that was sort of my way to somewhat visualize, even though it's probably not going to be anywhere near the same thing, but it was just to try to better visualize what that may look like in the future, getting from like Ethereum to Pulse Chain, just to get a feel for just in terms of the basics, in terms of the UX. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but like, I mean, at the end of the day, like as I was going through the process, like I was only very briefly holding on to like that that so if you go from if you want to get to like Binance Smart Chain, you have to use like wrapped ETH, and then the wrapped ETH you end up with on what you're cross chaining into, that asset's not secure. So like I didn't want to hold on to that wrapped ETH, and then that was sort of like they had a DEX where you could go from that wrapped ETH to BNB token or something like that. So it's not really clean. Like the UX wasn't that great, but it was something, and that's what a lot of speculators are using as an interim solution because of how clogged up the Ethereum network is. So people are basically using any swap to get from Ethereum over into AVAX, Ethereum into Phantom, and then those two networks are sort of the funnels that lead into BNB. I know Matic is another blow-off valve that exists in the market today. I haven't used their bridge, mostly because I just haven't really used Matic much at all. But nonetheless, like we keep seeing these EVM-based chains pop up in the network, and it just shows like there's just a lot of demand to use EVM, and sort of the safest way to go about it is just, you know, the native assets, if you can easily get the liquidity as you're transferring across. Even from getting from like wrapped ETH to BNB, it was like the slippage wasn't terrible, but there's definitely a lot of work that needs to take place there. So I'm pretty glad that it's taking place within the Hex and Pulse communities. At this point, I mean, I guess we could just say Hex community. When I say Hex at this point, I think of Hex and Pulse Chain. And I guess sort of the ethos, at least with the Hex community, has, in my opinion, the right kind of ethos that prioritizes the security side of it, because that to me is what's the most important, is security, and then the other part is, of course, the sustainability, and that ties into the native assets. So you know, I would say basically with if you're keeping those two in high regards, then you're at least going about this market in a more sustainable way. Like, sure, there's going to be people that claim to have made, you know, a lot of money elsewhere, but the reality is like across their whole portfolio, if you ask them to see what their portfolio is denominated in versus like Hex versus basically the native assets versus Hex versus ETH, and then in the very near future as well versus Pulse, most of the people that are speculating, probably like 99% of them, are getting wrecked. And basically the USD portfolio, like their USD values, it's inching up over time, but it's an illusion because it makes you think that you're winning, but in fact, like there's just a lot of people that are bleeding out versus the assets that are outpacing, you know, this market cycle. So that's what I look at it. I just try to be very, you know, very objective to it, and not try to, you know, play fairy tales that a lot of people tend to basically make up as they're speculating on a lot of this stuff. So that's just, you know, I would say the benefit is, again, everybody else like gambling in the market pumps your bags, and that is a good thing for us, you know, for everybody that's staking Hex. Like, you're gonna have Pulse later, so you'll have plenty of that going on Pulse Chain. So, but just remember the game here. Like, when you have a lot of these PRC tokens pop up, like most of them are going to get dumped into Pulse. So I will be playing some of those games, by the way. Like, perhaps I speculate on something, but you know, my intention is very, very clear, and I'm just being upfront about it. Like, I would never, other than the only two that makes sense to me are Pulse and Hex. Everything outside of that, to me, I'm just gonna be upfront about it. Everything outside of that is a shit coin to me, and I will be dumping those coins into more Hex and Pulse. But you know, people are going to speculate. There is going to be opportunities to get, you know, more of those assets, but you should not be rolling your whole stacks in to do that.
So if you hold something on Ethereum now that's not Hex, then are you valuing that more or less on Pulse Chain
That's a good question. I would say
currently?
For anything I'm holding on Ethereum that's not Hex, I would say the ones any coins that I am holding, I would say I value that ERC20 higher just because that's where the community is. But you know, as you saw basically with like Bitcoin to Bitcoin Cash in a way, you're gonna have a lot of these forks pop up through the PRC20s. So the difference is there's going to be the liquidity on Pulse Swap, and I would say my strategy with that is if I am holding any coins, if there's a lot of value that's perceived on the PRC20 side, then for what I'm holding, I will move it into the ERC20 side. Aside from like Pulse Hex, I'm not playing that game. Like I'm keeping my Pulse Hex because I don't know which side's going to have higher value in the end. Like there are some very big trade-offs when you consider the market makers on the Pulse side for PHEX versus the market makers on the Ethereum side. Like all the market makers for EHEX use ETH as sort of the asset to basically potentially buy into Ethereum Hex. So you know that part of it is because I'm getting a snapshot of coins that like in the case for Hex, like I don't want to make the incorrect assessment on which side's going to win. So, and that's the one exception. I'm just holding both sides, and the free market will ultimately determine what the relative, you know, valuations are. I would say there's strong arguments for both sides. You know, the other aspect of it is 4 or 5 years down the line, when Ethereum 2 does come out, then there's going to be another fork. I think Maddie brought this up in one of his streams a little while ago. So I believe in theory, because that system state has to get rolled over. So I believe that is going to lead to another copy, though the two main ones in my mind are EHEX and PHEX, and I'm just going to let both of those ride out. And then for any free coins I get from the snapshot that are outside of Pulse and PHEX, all the other coins I will roll into the ERC20 side. I don't hold a very big portfolio between ERC20s. Like my portfolio is relatively simple. Like I basically hold like five different coins, like Ethereum and Hex are two of those coins. So I don't really like. I guess for all these other ERC20s, that's something each person will have to kind of ask themselves with respect to whatever ERC20 they're holding. My speculation is that most of the value for a lot of those coins will sort of pool up on the ERC20 side, aside from the PHEX and EHEX, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like it really. I would say that the opportunity here is sort of getting the users using Pulse Chain and seeing how much better it is from a usability standpoint. They're going to have, fast finality for transactions. They're going to be able to freely speculate on NFTs, and there's going to be a lot of block space available to do that kind of stuff. So, for me, the main attraction is the opportunity for users to experience something that is just better from a UX standpoint, and then that leading to them using Pulse Chain for other purposes, and all of this stuff, like it's just upwards. It helps put like upwards price pressure from the burning.
So the launching parameters are undecided at this time. So what could I do to entice you to stay on our Pulse Chain? Let's say, seriously, what would your breaking point be if the starting price of your link on Pulse was 10x? If you were already up 10x, would you sell, or would you buy more, or would you hold?
If it's for Pulse, I mean, if it did launch at, I'm just gonna hold my pulse. So for me, it's more.
I'm
for
talking
me,
about
it's-
your pulse link.
Oh, my pulse, like for pulse. So,
If you're earning pulse swap while you're holding it there,
that's a
let's
yeah.
say
See, that's
50% of it's
Right,
locked. So
right.
you got to play the game anyway.
Yeah. See,
Are you
that's
gonna pay the high gas fees? Are you gonna bridge in your own Ethereum just to pay the gas fees to the Ethereum chain, or are you gonna let it ride?
See, that this is a good point, because this is the other consideration is when this does launch and you start to see what the APYs are in the liquidity pools. You know, perhaps I see that number and I'm like, oh, you know, perhaps I'll just use it for farming or something like that. So this is very different compared to, you know, what happens when most things tend to get like forked. Like in the case for Bitcoin Cash, the reason why Bitcoin Cash failed is because every Bitcoiner got a free copy, basically, you know, 1-to-1 on Bitcoin Cash. In the case for Pulse, like whoever's holding Ethereum is already heavily diluted out when that system state gets rolled over. So they do minimal damage in terms of the price. So, you know, considering what's taking place with PulseSwap, because that is one I do want to. I haven't set like a sacrifice allocation yet, but that is one that I am interested in adding just to have full coverage of the ecosystem. I guess to really give a good answer to your question, Maddie, I'll have to see what the APYs look like just for farming potentially for PulseSwap tokens, because I do want that. And if there is utility there, then for me, I may just end up holding basically both sides for everything and using it for other utilities. I would say that's the open question. And if there's a better way for me to get more PulseSwap tokens, and if it has that utility, I will use it for that purpose. But just keep in mind, like that would be for that purpose. I'm not actually holding onto those tokens for really any other reason. If there's a good reason to get, you know, PulseSwap tokens, then there is good utility there. So I do find the because I guess in terms of the vampire attack idea are the main market makers that exist on Ethereum, are they able to pull their liquidity? Like in theory, when that system state gets rolled over, that's the part that wasn't very clear to me. Is like, are the market makers that exist, like the really big ones on Ethereum for some of these coins, is their liquidity actually like being locked in indefinitely, like on PulseSwap? Because that's one thing I've been wondering.
It's my understanding that like the Pulse network can make whatever rules it wants now.
Oh yeah.
That would optimize the game theory of Pulse.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm like bringing this up to people like as an ongoing discussion. Like, you know, if somebody has some great insight, you can still contribute it. You can DM Richard or, you know, somebody in one of the Telegram chats and stuff, and basically, you know, get all the ideas out there. We need to run thought experiments and understand, you know, what amount of yield is optimal in the real world. What would people take in order, and how much liquidity should be auto locked forever, right? That's what Uniswap has also taught us in like V1, I believe. You had the liquidity just being locked forever, kind of. And then what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for impermanent loss, which means you provide both sides of the trade, and then you just let people take whatever side they want, which is not the best method, right? When it comes to Hex, because you're getting such a high APY for time locking it, and because the price appreciation is so great.
Do you mind if I just interject real quick here?
Please.
So Wave earlier mentioned that the major use case is speculation, right? So how are you determining the ceiling of speculation on Pulse Chain versus speculation on ETH? Like what's your criteria for distinguishing between the two? And like, how do you determine which one, like, how are you extrapolating which one has greater speculative potential?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess when you say Pulse chain itself, are you referring to the demands to use the network, or just purely from like a price standpoint?
So for each, so specifically, you mentioned tokens are speculative, right? And so I'm asking specifically about your perception of the speculative ceiling on Pulse Chain. And you know, we can parameterize that with like a success coefficient for the vampire attack, right? Like let's say anywhere from like 0.5 to 1. And so if the vampire attack is successful, like how do we define success? And additionally, like how do we determine the ceiling? Because it's the same asset class. If you reduce each token to simply its speculative use case, as you said.
Yeah.
And so to be fair with you, that's not the only use case of it. You didn't say it's the only one, but you did say it was the major one. Like, how are you determining the ranges of speculative success, let's say?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I would say right now there has, like, when most people look at, I guess I'll break it up into two things. There's first like the sort of the end result when people look at the price chart, and then sort of the actual demand side of it that drives a lot of what you see, I guess, on the price chart, at least for something like Ethereum to some extent. So like in the case for the price chart, most people tend to just look at, they'll sort of benchmark off other EVMs that exist. So with Ethereum's first cycle, it has been sort of popularized to use as sort of a benchmark in terms of price performance, especially for hex. Like a lot of hexagons like to measure the price performance on the macro scale for hex as an asset versus what Ethereum has done since its inception. So that's purely just from like a price standpoint. And then I would say in terms of the vampire attack, the part that would be more like objective to me on that regard is like how much, like a good way to sort of quantify the demand that's coming into Pulse Chain just based off the amount of fees that are being, or the amount of burning that's taking place just from users speculating on all sorts of stuff. So, you know, in terms of the vampire attack, there's demands that's measured based off the fees that are being burned, and then the other aspect that I think has some merit to it as well is the amount of TVL that's locked in the ecosystem aside from p-hex. So p-hex may already provide a huge kind of anchor in terms of the TVL that's locked, but in terms of like all these other networks that are popping up, they're just adding up the amount of value that's locked across all the protocols. So like in the case for Pulse Chain, you'll have all these other PRC20 tokens, and if there's actually some significant value that's locked in that kind of stuff, then you compare that to what it exists on the root chain like Ethereum, then you could sort of get like a good relative kind of comparison there. I'm keeping my expectations relatively low on the TVL being high for some of these protocols that roll over with the system state. Like I would say if there's anything high there, it's just a nice bonus for me. But yeah, I would say those are really the only two metrics I would look at, is the fee burning and then the amount of TVL that's locked in Pulse Chain. So, and then that can be compared or even extrapolated versus what Ethereum has done over a much longer length of time. Like the price chart stuff is, it's pretty useful. I just think it could be applied a little. It gets applied purely from a theoretical upside standpoint. So Ethereum's first cycle, and then also what BNB did during its first cycle, I think are pretty useful too. And then in practice, like when Pulse Chain launches, I'm assuming it's going to be pretty similar, where like there's going to be a lot of supply that's held by the OA, which is off market, and then there's just going to be a very illiquid supply. So like when people sort of factor in things like market cap, I wouldn't actually go off the market cap that's listed off the. I would just take whatever the market cap is and multiply it by 10%, and then that gives you sort of a big gauge in terms of like the upside in my opinion. So that's I guess that's how I would summarize, or that would be my response to that question.
All right, so if I were to do like a fair summary, you're using a previous price chart. In fact, you're using 2, ETH and BNB. So I'm going to make a summary, then I'm going to make a few points, and I'll happily restate them. Okay. So ETH, BNB, like in my considerations as well, I considered EOS and one as well. So Harmony one. So as well, like if you're measuring the success of the vampire attack via fee burning, and you're using the ETH price chart, well, the ETH price chart has to be heavily discounted in that case, right? And the reason for that claim is that ETH initially in its first cycle did not have fee burning, right? So, but as well, like this measure of vampire attack success via fee burning, sure, it's easy to measure that, but there are other dimensions that that are important, and that in about which I interjected to Maddie earlier about this a consideration of the same keys, right? Like we get the users, they're there, they're already there. So that's like a huge thing. I would say that's it. Like if we were to initialize that parameter, we'd be looking at a 1 in that case, right? So you'd have to view a kind of linear combination of parameters used to determine the success of a vampire attack, right? So users there, user stuff is already there, and then activity, right? So those are the 3 main dimensions. And so the users are kind of technically already there, right? Their keys work, 1 RPC setting is sufficient. They have coins there, right? And so fee burning really would have to have some kind of interplay when it comes to awareness of the existence or the truth of the 2 preceding dimensions for the user. So does the user know about that, right? Because additionally, I wanted to make, well, maybe I'll stop there. And
most locks aren't permanent in DeFi. And so when we talk about lock, it's in Hex, it sure means a lot more if you're locked for 15 years than in any other protocol. Yeah, whether you're talking about providing liquidity or you're setting limit orders or you're, committing to hold on to a token, right? Like for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And so, sorry. Yeah, I'll just say it. Like I said, I'll mention again, I don't want to be belligerent. I just kind of want to find out the dimensions along which you're making your assessment, and hopefully we can have our models refined and converged into something better. So I'm curious to know if you've also considered EOS and Harmony as well. Maybe you didn't want to give that away.
Yeah, I haven't looked at Harmony, but I have considered EOS as well, just purely just purely in terms of the technicals. No, not so. I guess there's the technical side of which, I guess that's not really that's more just the price chart. It's not really measuring, I guess, the vampire attack. I guess for the vampire attack, if I had to put one simple metric is just what the TVL is, excluding p-hex, because p-hex, we already know that there's already going to be a lot of hexagons that use p-hex, and then what is the TVL that emerges outside of that in terms of the entire ecosystem, and that's just sort of what I'm looking at is the end result. So, and then the TVL is something that can get basically measured as time goes on. Like I know like in the case for Ethereum, what spooked a lot of ETH holders, this was back in, I think it was actually much earlier this year, but there was claims that Binance Smart Chain did a vampire attack on Ethereum, and theirs was just there at the time. They basically had an EVM with low fees, and they set up basically theirs was a centralized bridge, but they set up basically a bridge to get liquidity over from Ethereum over into Binance Smart Chain, and they actually had an explosion in TVL across their entire network, and it's something you can even look at on like DeFi Llama. You could see what that looks like over time, and then as Maddie stated, like in practice, the majority of that TVL isn't actually locked. Like total value locked is sort of misleading. There really should be another term for it, but just for simplicity, let's just call it TVL. And then that to me is sort of what tells the tale as like an end metric. So, but in the case for Pulse Chain, like that TVL can mean.
Yeah, I mean, that's an important distinction. You know, are Satoshi Nakamoto's coins, are those circulating, or are they total value locked? And if so, are we counting the total value as the 10 cents of electricity that he pumped into his first million coins, or what, right? So, or is it just another, you know, like bad metric like market cap, where really, what do you mean by locked, right? And so if you're doing a limit order or you're providing liquidity, that the reality there is that you're willing to part with certain coins at a certain price, and the market can act on that, right? Whereas if we're talking about coins being locked because they're inactive or because they've gone, you know, into some scheme that allows people to print free money and hand out, you know, free tokens that they're calling yield farming. I mean, Hex basically invented yield farming, and then the term got hijacked and used for a bunch of scam projects, right? So
yeah, just to put it in like in the case for, I can do a share screen on this as well.
oh, sweet.
Yeah, so like in the case for Binance Smart Chain, if you look at what their network looked like at the time, and granted, like most of the TV, like most of this stuff is really just it's whatever shitcoins are on Binance Smart Chain. This is basically how it is for every L1 ecosystem. But in practice, you'll see this kind of number start to boost up dramatically over this. And granted, this is literally something that can take months. Like it's not going to be instant.
Yeah, but it's like in Hex, you have literally a game theoretical incentive to like not yield farm for other coins, to like just do your time and time lock, right? Which protects the price. But this, if I'm a liquidity provider and I'm getting counted in those numbers, I can essentially be wash trading. I can, you know, as long as I have the crypto, I can pretend like I'm putting it up, but then never really, you know, I can have a bot go in and make sure that those prices never get filled. Is that correct?
I'm not too familiar. Like I guess are you referring to like those sandwich attacks that happen on Ethereum?
Yeah, I mean,
where,
like total value locked, like locked by whom, with what admin keys, like, you know.
Yeah, most of it is, so like the thing is, like most of the, so like in the case for Pulse Chain, this is where like a lot of the names you see in terms of like in practice on Pulse Chain, if you're just looking at protocols aside from, if you're looking at things aside from PHEX, you know, you're way more likely to see something like PulseSwap sort of be the leader in that regard, and all it would really be is sort of the aggregate amount of like liquidity that's added up across all the pools. And then there's going to be other protocols that pop up. Like I agree with what you're saying with regards to like how the TVL and sort of how it's a misleading or it's sort of misspoken. Like there is value in these pools. It's just the terminology of it is sort of misleading, because anybody can pull that value out from that pool at any time, basically. So you are completely correct on that. And then generally what happens, like what ends up happening is, I guess if the verbiage of that, you know, changes to something that's more representative of how the value is being used, you can basically just sort of add up the aggregate of that value. There's going to be, because there's the way I view it is like, because you're going to have an open network, like people trying to launch their own shit coins on Pulse, it's actually a good thing. Like, I would never hold on to shit coins that are launching on Pulse. I would basically move that back into whatever the native assets are. But like everybody that sort of
I would hold on to it on Pulse.
Yeah, well it's, I'm like, in what tends to happen on these native networks is that value is going to go into whatever the dominant. So like if Pulse Swap ends up being a successful vampire attack in theory, I guess that's the other thing, is you can measure what the size of the liquidity pools are in Pulse Swap over, you know, like a period of 6 months, and then you can just do a comparison to other swap protocols that exist on other networks. That would actually be a pretty interesting one if you compared, you know, Pulse Swap to something like Pancake Swap. So like in the case for Pancake Swap, if you click on this one, you could see what I think they do have charts somewhere that show, it looks like they actually may have some of it here. But there is information out there where you can see what the net amount of like all the, I guess the other factors, because you have price fluctuations on everything, like it's going to be pretty it's going to be a whipsaw, because you do have price fluctuations across everything, aside from, of course, the other than maybe just basically other than stable coins, you're going to have huge price fluctuations on this kind of stuff. But in practice, I would compare it to other swap protocols, and then just what the overall, because even if the word is being misused, it's still in my mind a good metric to go off of, because you're even if it's being misused, you're sort of doing it one-to-one compared to how everybody else is sort of tracking it, and then you could use that to gauge the relative growth of the network itself compared to other protocols or other layer ones that exist in the market. Like I don't expect there to be like an immediate I think this is something that's going to play out over, you know, multiple months. Like the airdrop adds a lot of initial speculation, which is a huge advantage, because like in the case for Binance Smart Chain, like it took them a while to sort of successfully start to attract Ethereum users, and sort of the airdrop is just an easier way to get that initial attention for users to come over. Like, hey, you have free coins over here. It's an easy sell. Whereas for like in the case for Binance Smart Chain, you did have to use a centralized bridge just to get over into their layer one ecosystem.
How do you prove that BSC attracted Ethereum users? Right, like they have their own pipeline in, and like how would you measure the percentage of Ethereum users that are on BSC? Maybe that's too hard of a question, but I'm just saying like that claim is a little bit difficult to defend.
Yeah, the only you'd probably have to compare it to, you'd basically have to take all the wallets on Ethereum and then see, because it's all connected through MetaMask. So I guess to do a fair comparison, you'd have to see which Ethereum users have activity in their wallets on both chains. So you could do something like that.
Right. And so did you do that, or like that's really my question.
No, I just looked at the TVL. Yeah, I just looked at the TVL, and then basically what the main funnels were into Binance Smart Chain, which was really just they had the bridge. They had their central, well, it's, I guess to not go into details on their bridge, yeah, they just had their bridge to get value over from Ethereum into BNB, and then really the main metric that spooked a lot of Ethereum, it got a lot of attention on crypto Twitter, was the TVL on Binance Smart Chain, because that was sort of one of the narratives at the time, because it had like a huge spike, and then, you know, everybody was calling Ethereum shit, and then there was a lot of BNB shills at the time. So yeah, there's I guess, and then even to Renshi T's comments, so SushiSwap Empire attacked Uniswap by offering a reward token sushi. Yeah, so that is another. That was actually like one of the early vampire attacks for this market cycle. Pulse swap is really interesting. I would just purely look at it like in the case for pulse swap, like if you start to have a lot of liquidity come into pulse swap, then to me it's working. Whatever the vampire attack or whatever it ends up getting called is working pretty well. And then I guess in the case for BNB, yeah, just to me it still boils down to the same thing. You're looking at the TVL as an end result. You're just seeing how much liquidity is basically on the network.
So you keep going back to TVL, which is actually completely reasonable, right? Earlier you said you were a primarily L1 token investor, and so it's reasonable to assume that it's actually not a bad metric. It has not been an unperformant metric for you in terms of its utility. The reason I mention this is because there's a follow-up question to this comment, is like whether it's actually reasonable from you as a primarily L1 investor to claim that, or not necessarily to claim, but to even state that you wouldn't invest in any pulse chain shitcoins, because it seems like across the board you don't invest in anything that's not L1 other than a small percentage, right? So is it even meaningful to say that?
Yeah, I'd say as a percentage. So like in the case for the L1s, like, so the vast majority of my portfolio is, you know, I have Ethereum, Hex, like those are basically the dominant, especially with the move that Hex had. It's definitely a dominant percentage in the portfolio. And for me, it's like I don't see the point in like me taking, you know, something like Hex and trying to like get more Hex by reinvesting that into like another coin, because like to me it's like I'm at statistical odds against the market, like in that regard, just based off the price chart. So and that's also true for like, you know, for a lot of ERC20s versus Ethereum, like because of where we are, I guess, with respect to the market cycle. You know, we're so far in at this point that, you know, to me, everything across the market, like Bitcoin's at elevated risk, Ethereum's at elevated risk. So, you know, I'm more conservative and risk averse in that regard, where I personally will look out for the next bear cycle and then put very small percentage bets into, you know, other coins that try to build into the Pulse ecosystem. Perhaps like it's a range of like ERC20s that look promising. But in practice, like even in the next bull cycle, it's the same game that gets played. Like all the DeFi one coins, like Uniswap dumped into ETH, chart totally annihilated, Synthetics annihilated, never recovering, SushiSwap annihilated. Everything is literally like all those DeFi one coins are all literally dying to Ethereum. And then what ends up happening is people buy those shit coins, they get wrecked versus Ethereum, and then they try to move their coins over into some other shit coin that already had this huge price pump that's up like 25x. And then they end up getting wrecked on that coin. And then it's this negative feedback loop where they just keep making bad decision after bad decision. And then they get one hit, which sort of in a very bad way, like they basically get one hit of dopamine and then they roll it over into another coin and then get wrecked anyway. So like there to me, there are times to like invest in like if I had to just look at this rationally from like a more sustainable route, because like institutional investors that come into this space, like they're putting very small percentage bets outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum, like if I'm just being honest there. And there are going to be other, you know, other coins that ascend to the top. Like Hex hit number 3 on the rankings in such a short period of time, and then that started getting a lot of attention, and then now that has more like even on ramps for institutional investors. So but in practice is like if you look at the bear market, it's like that's where you get such ridiculous asymmetry with coins. Like at this point, to me, everything like Bitcoin and Ethereum have already made huge moves on their price charts. So, you know, for me at this stage of the market cycle, like I will speculate, like I'm not going to lie, like I will speculate on some PRC20s, but it's going to be a very, very low percentage relative to my total L1 holding, because if Pulse Chain ends up being very successful in, let's say, 4 to 5 years, there's already going to be a lot of burning that takes place on Pulse tokens from people basically doing all sorts of stupid shit on the network, like buying random coins, like doing NFTs. Some of it is going to become incredibly valuable. Like I'm not trying to hate on it. Like it has really, really good utility in the market for like pumping the bags of like the L1 holders. And there is going to be there is going to be some asymmetric plays. It's just most of it gets way out of hands, and most people end up having this illusion that they're winning when they're actually losing, and losing value relative to those native assets over time. Like if the coin cannot outpace Pulse token, there's no point to it, because for me that means I have to like watch the coin over very short time frames and then worry about getting like dumped on, versus just holding like Pulse token and just letting it do its thing, and then let everybody else get wrecked speculating, and then my bags just get pumped from it, just from the fees burning. Like that's just the way I look at it. You know, I have a very red lens when I look at the overall market. I do participate in some of the speculation that takes place, but I just look at it for what it is. Like it's all degenerate gambling, and there's only really those that end up being very successful in this market tend to just pick the main L1s and native assets, and then that lets them ascend to higher valuations in net worth. Because, you know, in 4 to 5 years, like let's just say even 2022, let's say Hex is trading at $2. Well, now every unit of Hex buys more units of shitcoins if I wanted to speculate on shitcoins. So that's the way I look at it. Like the coins that don't make it, their value is going to bleed to the native assets, and then you'll be able to buy more of speculative tokens versus just holding, you know, the good blue chips, because the main L1s and the main native assets are just going to end up going up in value over time, and then that buying power is just going to keep increasing. So sorry, I'll stop there. I'll let you continue.
I'd say that's actually a smart assessment. So I'd love for you to continue, actually.
Yeah, yes. So can you speak more to the macro and where we're at in the cycle, in your opinion, not financial advice, and tell me why I dug up like 1.5% of a Bitcoin today and sold it, because I, you know, like it was difficult to get to, and I got to it and I was like, I don't like Bitcoin that much.
Yeah, Bitcoin, I don't have many nice things to say about Bitcoin, to be honest. I could pull up a price chart for Bitcoin, at least if we maybe just first sort of
Bitcoin or ETH or whatever you see like the most value
Yeah.
for this community. I think everybody on here already sold their Bitcoin
Yeah.
in the early days of Quant Gang, but maybe
Right.
for ETH, because we have to hold ETH, or
Yeah.
you know, whatever you want to show.
Yeah, I would say the let me pull up because the one
I definitely sold like 1/3 of an ETH this week.
yeah
So I was like $4,000. Hey, I'll take that.
Yeah, you could get quite a bit for ETH nowadays for big. So I don't hold very much Bitcoin. I do hold a little bit, not a lot. Like in terms of the 1 and 2, like basically whatever Bitcoin I would have held got thrown into ETH some time ago, and then that's been more of an anchor for me, just for the 1 and 2. The reason why I still look at the Bitcoin price chart is because of how much gravity it has relative to the entire market. Because when all these coins get listed on centralized exchanges, they're basically renting liquidity. They get coupled to Bitcoin, and then whenever Bitcoin has like a huge dump, even though Hex doesn't have this issue with all this liquidity locked in Bitcoin, the moment Bitcoin starts to drag down the entire market, that's if Bitcoin did go into a bear wave, we'd be objectively in a bear market, as the worst case scenario. So it does hold. It is still useful from purely just a technical standpoint, and then from the Bitcoin price chart. Sorry, I think I have the. Let me redo the screen share here. And this is why, like, this is why I just look at where Bitcoin is at currently, and these trend lines I draw here, I actually borrow this from another analyst that sort of offers, in my opinion, some really good perspectives alongside somebody mainstream like Ben Cohen. Like, if I had to just say one really good analyst in this market just for Bitcoin and ETH charts, I would say hands down it's Ben Cohen. His metrics have been pretty solid, and he looks at it in terms of risk, and even on his risk models, Bitcoin and Ethereum are just trading at higher units of risk at this stage of the market cycle. So in the case for Bitcoin, like, this is just the 4-hour chart, and it still has to get out of this downtrend that it's stuck here. If this actually gets pushed back down to this lower channel, I will definitely be concerned in the case for Bitcoin. I'm not trying to trade these moves. Like, this is just, I'm purely just looking at, whether the cycle still looks healthy or not. And right now, Bitcoin still has to get back above, the 20-week moving average. It did fall below the 20-week moving average. And if it cannot get back above this 20-week moving average and reclaim it as support, that's where I would start to get concerned for, the price chart on Bitcoin. I'm not really too worried about it right now, but we have seen some pretty violent down draws in this market. So, there's still the possibility of these things happening. DXY has been going up dramatically, actually, over the last couple of months. So, and that's why, sort of that I even posted this. I gave a link to, the guy doing a lot of good TA on Bitcoin, because he's not picking sides. He's just looking at the overall macro trends. And the reality is Bitcoin is trading in a very wide kind of macro trend where, it going to higher values to me is that's in the realm of possibility, but so is, retesting lower price levels that could lead to an absolute annihilation on a lot of altcoins. Now, to put it in perspective, let's just pull up an altcoin that has done really, really bad over the last like close to 7 to 8 months now. So as of
What
today,
do we have there?
This is a Gen 1 DeFi coin, Synthetics. This is the case for basically all of the Gen 1 DeFi coins on Ethereum. This is still down 76% from its previous all-time high. So this has not recovered yet. And I would say one of the issues with that, when I look at that, is to me, it just seems like the money in the market is just moving around, where it just went from these other coins and perhaps it rotated into something else. When I start to see a lot of coins struggle to recover, it's a bit concerning in terms of the amount of money that's entering, I guess, the market. Because I just like to look at the overall market structure on things. There is some coins that are doing well, like Ethereum did really well over the last couple months, but there's other coins that are seriously having a very hard time here. And in the case for grayscale products like GBTC and ETH for Ethereum, those have not had any net inflows in months now. So like there's definitely a much lower like buying pressure at this point. And hopefully we see higher prices, but we're kind of trend, like from my viewpoint, we're kind of moving. There's just, the moment there's a lot of big sells that start to happen, it's kind of bad news bears at that point. Now, I'm not really bearish at this state. I'm just looking at the overall trends of some of these coins. I do think Bitcoin will see higher valuations over the course of this entire market cycle, but I'm going to just be very honest. Like, risk levels at this point are just fairly high. Like, Bitcoin is up. What is it up now? Like over 15x since the bottom. Ethereum up like some over 40x. So
I was up 5. I was up 5x.
Yeah.
On this 1.5% of Bitcoin that I had, right? And it was just like, yeah, that's good. I'm cool with that.
Yeah. if I had to give a best case scenario for Bitcoin,
I'm not gonna get another 5x off this, so it's
Yeah,
done. Like
it's
back into cash you go.
yeah, you'll maybe like maybe if you manage to and trying to sell blow off tops is not like it's not a
Yeah,
reasonable expectation in this market.
exactly.
So, somebody getting like a 2 to 2.5x at this point on Bitcoin, like they did amazing if they managed to like get to the higher end of the potential blow off top route. And that's sort of where I'd say objectively, like when I looked at that analysis where the guy's just looking at the possibilities, this upper trend line and to me this lower trend line are both valid scenarios. Like Bitcoin has hit the upper trend line twice this market cycle, but it's also
Yeah,
hit
look
the
at
lower
that.
trend line twice this market cycle. So these are both options on the table. These are both to me just valid possibilities in terms of the overall surface area of possibilities that exist. And that's why like so many people just get wrecked in this market is because they start to project like on the Bitcoin price chart on absolute terms. And then they make like they sort of get biased towards what they want or what their feelings want to happen. We live in a world
Yeah.
where a lot of possibilities can end up happening, and it's just a surface area of different results that can happen along the way.
Well, look at me, I sold $800 of Bitcoin here, and I had a chance to sell it at 50K back, 7, 8 months ago, right? And I didn't feel like it at the time. And now it's like, well, all right, like you did your work here, Bitcoin, time to time to go home now. Like,
Yeah, if Bitcoin starts to if it does manage to sort of set itself free from kind of the weakness it's seeing now, like even in the case for Ethereum, like I haven't sold really much, like I haven't really sold any of my Ethereum yet for this cycle, but if Bitcoin starts to push up to higher valuations, like I am going to start selling like ETH in pretty heavily once it starts to go to like I'm at the point where
you've been saying that for a while.
Yeah. I will have to start to de-risk like certain assets that are very high up. Ethereum is very high up since the bottom. So even around like 8 to 9K, like to me that's where I start to remove some of that risk, off the table. In the case for Pulse Chain, I'm not really worried about because if you look at things like even let's just say worst case scenario, let's just say we get hit with like a bear market sometime in 2022, and let's just say we're open to the timeline on that. Like this is
you're saying at 8K, somebody's paying twice the fees that they're paying now.
Yeah.
You think that's a thing?
I mean, I don't think it's sustainable. I definitely don't think it's sustainable. In theory, like if people were paying those fees, like there would be people like paying like just crazy amounts to transact on the net. I really don't think it's a sustainable. I don't think it's sustainable.
I sold ETH at like 2K, so I'm not one to talk, man. Like I don't know where the top is.
Yeah. And the thing that's it's the if we even pull up how Ethereum moves over long periods of time. I mean, Ethereum's had a really good market cycle, and this is just more of a reference point. Like Ethereum is also moving in a very wide channel, and most people are sort of optimistically hoping for this nice blow off top scenario, but Ethereum could also do something like this, like in this lower region here, where it looked like it was going to break out and then basically did a flush of a lot of leverage in the system. So, like it's sort of the nature, I guess, as a holder, like perhaps at some point, somebody's happy with perhaps some gains they have in the market, and ideally it gets to a point where you don't have to de-risk a large percentage of your portfolio to harvest like a lot of profits. And I know that's especially true for like hexagons that did really well over the last 2 years, because the upside has been so massive, and that's sort of what it ends up turning into, in my opinion, long term with a lot of this stuff. So I just look at the chart like, okay, Ethereum is up consistently. Like Ethereum today is up, you know, 3,620% on the price chart on the weekly. And then if we look at what altcoins are up, and this is why I don't speculate on a lot of these Gen 1 ERC20 coins. They're underpacing Ethereum. Like the data is already in the chart. This is also going to happen on Pulse Chain. There's going to be PRC20s in that index, in my opinion, if you exclude Hex. Like, to be fair, like you do have to, well, I mean, I guess, because the problem is like Hex couldn't artificially inflate that index if you're just trying to look at, you know, how outside of the Hex ecosystem, what is the real number? So the way I'm personally going to look at it is, what is the price performance as an aggregate of these PRC20s? What is that price performance versus Pulse and versus Hex? And if it cannot match that price performance at a minimum, then it's a no-go for me. Because the whole point of like speculating on those coins is for it to outpace the native assets, because you're taking on more risk by investing in random PRC20s. Now, I'm not trying to dog ERC. Like, I want people to do stupid shit on Pulse Chain because I know it's beneficial for Pulse holders and their bags pumping over time. So I want all the stupid stuff people do to do on Pulse Chain, because I know there's a big benefit to that in terms of the price of Pulse token. And that's just the way I'm looking at it. And, you know, it's, for me, it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing with a bunch of people getting wrecked, speculating, and pumping our bags as a result. But that's just the reality of it. You're gonna hear all sorts of like stupid memes and narratives of all these like PRC20 shitcoins that launch on Pulse Chain. And just remember, all those memes and narratives are garbage and useless, and the end game is to get more Pulse. All right, I'll stop there.
Hell yeah.
Oh, we could also pull up the price chart for Hex too, if we want to cover.
Yeah, tell me
cover that
how
one.
wrecked we are, because I feel like
I mean,
it'd be easier to get a 5x on Hex than it would on Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. I would say because of how because we've had a nice retracement on the Hex to USD chart, it's down about 70%.
How far down? How far down can we go though? That's another question.
I would say if there is a capitulation, I wouldn't be surprised to see like wicking below 10 cents. I would say at this point, like if you are speculating, it's pretty, like if your end goal is just to slowly build up a stack over time, this is kind of a good spot to sort of start looking into it, in my opinion. It could, in theory, you know, wick below 10 cents or whatever, but the upside on that would be so crazy. Like, I mean, because if you get something for sub 10 cents, I mean, doing a 10x on that, to me, like just based off the historical moves, it's like, yeah, like you have a lot of upside in your favor, even at these levels. Like, I mean, as you said, doing a 5x on the Hex price chart and then versus a 5x on, you know, the Bitcoin price chart. Bitcoin is struggling to even keep up with Ethereum right now. Like, Bitcoin is basically getting completely steamrolled right now by Ethereum. So, you know, I'm just seeing a lot of weakness, at least on the Bitcoin price chart. So if we're gonna look at just upside potential, I don't think we're gonna see. There's just, in my mind, no way you're gonna see more upside in Bitcoin versus even where the current price levels are versus Hex. And then if you're gonna cost average into it, like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's up to you to sort of recognize like what your personality is and what your if you're likely to sell a bottom, because this is what ends up like, because we are trying to find, like, price discovery works both ways. You go into an impulse wave, you hit a local top somewhere, and then you also have retracements, which is part of the whole process of price discovery. So, you know, if you're someone that's going to sell a bottom, then, you know, going slow and just throwing some buys in is probably going to be your best strategy, because a lot of people, like people that are really trying to trade this, are wasting their time. Like the people that really made the money, that really made all the money on this move, are the ones that just held on to their coins. Like everybody else that tried to trade this just ended up dying. People died here, you know, they died again over here, they died here, they died again, and then basically all the way up. So, you know, it's just the nature of this game. Like making money is pretty savage in this market, but at the end of the day, it really just boils down to people holding on to their coins and not really selling. And that's really all it is. So, you know, if you get 70 to 80% retracements, that's, in my opinion, where the risk levels sort of start to reset, and you have a good zone for a base to start to build off of. Now, what a lot of people sort of underestimate is just because you bought at some random point on a price chart, that doesn't mean the chart still can't drop, you know, another 30 to 50% from there. Like this is just how crypto works. It's the reason why you get all this upside is from the volatility, and that is what creates this kind of asymmetric opportunity we see time and time again. So overall, I'm very excited for you know, the overall price chart for Hex in 2022. We have a long year to go in 2022. I mean, we're still not even at 2022. And if we just consider the overall performance of Hex over the last 2 years, it's done exceptionally well. I mean, obviously, it's already beaten everything on Ethereum. Obviously, at this point, that's not even debatable. Like Hex won in terms of all the DeFi coins. Most DeFi coins haven't even put a new high in the market yet. So when some of those coins can start to put new all-time highs in, then they can start to talk. But as of today, there's a lot of rect bag holders in Gen 1 DeFi coins, and this has performed consistently well over the last 2 years. And then the purple and the green line are just sort of general trend lines people like to sort of just visualize on Twitter. And like all things, trend lines are very subjective. At the end of the day, the market is going to give you what you're going to get. And just sort of my general rule is if you've had a pretty sizable retracement, it's a good time to sort of start to speculate if you haven't done so already. So, and then like always, yeah, just whoever holds onto their coins tends to do well over, you know, a multi-year timeline. So this last bull, this entire bull wave Hex had lasted for basically close to, this was almost a year. This was just 2 months shy of lasting one year. Or I'm sorry, maybe 3 months shy, but either way, this was about a 9-month bull wave. So this went on for a very long period of time. So I would say that's a good thing, because if you just look at how each successive move has just taken longer to play out, and it's very possible you see that same behavior play out on the Hex price chart. So if we do see a longer cycle, which is what, you know, Ben Cohen is suggesting for this market cycle, that would actually be a very good thing for the Hex price chart, because it would allow for more time for price discovery on the upside as we, you know, continue the market cycle. But for Bitcoin, again, for Bitcoin and Ethereum, like those are at those are at high risk levels at this point. Like, yes, Ethereum could still do like a 4x, but you know, I can see Hex go to like $2 in 2022 if Ethereum hits these higher targets that a lot of people are speculating on. And these are, and for Bitcoin and Ethereum, these are still scenarios. Again, at the end of the day, the people that make all the money just buy the dips, they hold on to the coins, and then they just let them ride for a long period of time. And that's really all it boils down to. It's really just that. And if you pick the right coins, you'll do very well financially in this market.
Just in case Maddie has stepped aside. Oh no, he's back. All right.
I was eating. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I was just going to try to summarize your investment kind of thesis. It's low touch with the majority of your portfolio. Is that right?
I'm sorry, for which could you say it again? I missed that last part.
Oh, sure. So your portfolio is basically low touch. So what I mean by that, with the majority of your portfolio. So you're in L1s, you know, a small portion you're just doing degenerate stuff with. And as far as I can tell, you're just you're just maximizing your EV from the inverse correlation between the price of an L1 coin and the price of non-L1 coins on the same chain. So, okay, cool. Yeah, no, I have no issues with that.
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page there.
Oh,
I didn't
okay,
really
sure.
have anything to say. I just wasn't sure if Maddie was there. So, anyways.
I promised that I would throw up a few figures and whatnot. Thanks to everybody who's playing along in the comments. We've had now, I would say, about 23 hours of people continuously submitting random names for Pulse Swap. Literally, like I did a 14-hour stream. People were doing it the whole time. I love it. It's cool. This is probably on this YouTube channel is probably the greatest collection of names that Pulse Swap could switch to out of any record ever created. So thank you all for that. Here, people have voted to say in this poll 9 days ago, 1,400 of you voted and said 75% of people would sacrifice anything for Richard Hart's Pulse Swap token. 30% would sacrifice a lot, 45% a little. Only 7% of people said that they would not sacrifice anything. 9% said not sure yet, and 8% just wanted to see the results. So those are really cool numbers. Then we got another random line from Richard Hart, which is always fun to see. We've looked at in the show before. So yeah, I mean, by the end of 2022, it's you know, it's still going up and to the right. So that's, if you zoom out far enough, you see it goes up and to the right, and you see that the more patience you have, the more you're rewarded, because this is on a log scale. So shout out to the random line. It's you know, it's kept us going all these years. It hasn't let us wrong if we held on to Hex for at least 7 months at a time. So for now, that's good enough to, you know, to look at for me.
The chart is amazing. I mean, it's at this point, like the results are in. I mean, Hex is the only, like, it's the only if somebody invested in basically ERC, other than perhaps, because there is a big speculative bubble in NFTs, and that's what I'm not going to go, you know, too deep into. I don't have anything against people, you know, speculating on NFTs or metaverse stuff. But if you just look at, you know, overall performance of these assets on Ethereum, so far Hex is one of the only, there's really like maybe 5 tops like that are performing at a very high standard. And then if you just measure that relative to Hex, like Hex is outpacing that. Like there's so much data on it at this point. There's the chart, you know, Richard's posting, there's the price metrics that Gerard is doing. Whales Only has some really interesting price metrics too that just reinforce that thesis as well. And if you just look at it on higher time frames, like that's why I only look at these assets on higher time frames, and ideally I just want to have the assets that are really outpacing this market cycle, because everything else is just memes and narratives that comes and goes on crypto Twitter, and I'm not interested in investing in unsustainable memes and narratives. Like I want just blue chip native assets I can hold on to. Now, blue chip native assets are going to have really deep persistence on the price chart. Happens every single time. But if you just look at the overall, you know, monthly to weekly to monthly trends, that over long periods of time tends to tell the tale. So, you know, I'm very happy with the performance. Like obviously that Hex has done, you know, over the last year or so, even after this really deep even if you just look at the size of retracements, so far, like the amount of multiples that original stack is up now is up stupid. Like even the interest that's getting paid at these levels is like it's absurd. So it's like I just honestly I don't even care that the price is trading at like 13 to 14 cents. Like if anything, what I'm mostly looking at is if people start to like really panic sell at really low prices, I'm going to like I'm not a whale in this market. Like I've been in crypto for a while, like, and financial reward has definitely resulted from that. But if people start to like sell at like a stupid price, like I will be buying, like I will be helping to whatever I can help on. Like I will be helping a small amount, like whatever my contribution is to get some of that supply out of circulation. There's just not a lot of liquid supply on this thing. And I really do think we are going to see at least like $2 in 2022. So it's just sometimes it just takes some time to build up before you go into the next wave. There's just a lot of good stuff happening with with Pulse Chain. I really am very excited for the Pulse ecosystem. This is finally something like very fresh to look at for the first time in the market for a very long period of time. And with what Richard has achieved so far with Hex, to me, Pulse Chain is basically a no-brainer. Like everything that's come out of this ecosystem, just look at people posting, their flexes on Twitter. They're posting Rolexes. Some people are posting Lambos. You don't see that in any other crypto community. Like you really don't see that stuff getting posted elsewhere. Like, I mean, it's just what ends up happening. Like a lot of people get financially successful. This is spreading a lot of good virality on social media outlets. And then now I know some of those people that are building, they're literally now building stuff on Pulse Chain, helping out adoption. So by the way, if any of you decide to make a shitcoin or whatever it is you make on Pulse Chain, just it does help adoption. So there is a lot of good benefits to that kind of stuff. Like I'm not trying to hate on, I'm just very objective. Like I have a very I guess the way one person described it, they just said I have a very logic based brain, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, you picked the right place because at Quant Gang, we want to hear the truth and the deep analysis. And it seems like that's what we're getting. Somebody shouted you out in the comments here and said that they're going to subscribe to you. I would recommend everybody go subscribe to Wave3TV on YouTube. The link is in the description below. And yeah, so those are those are super good points. I appreciate our discussion there of everything.
I'm really glad you had Somlier on, because there's just a lot of unknown, or I guess there's a lot of questions I had related to cross chain, and I'm very glad I had a chance to even ask you questions related to IB, because I see stuff like that being talked about, but to me it just sort of boils down to like the sustainability of certain design choices that are being made, and that sort of does, even though it's not really being it's not like a focus during this market cycle. Like it's honestly something that's probably going to get brushed over from like a speculative standpoint for prices this cycle. But that is stuff that doesn't matter if you're planning on being in this game for long periods of time, because like I really don't want to hold on to things that are very like high maintenance assets and have like all this other psychological worries and things like that. I just want things that are nice and simple, like just meets the purpose of what it's seeking to do. Like Hex is it's really rivaling the store of value side of things. It has a lot of game theory built into it, and then Pulse Chain also has a lot of interesting it scales differently. Like Pulse Chain scales like it's going to be deflationary. Like I do believe that it is possible. Like this sounds crazy, but I do think it is possible for Pulse to have a bigger initial move. This is no guarantee. This is just speculation. This is 100% speculation, what I'm saying. But I do believe it is possible for Pulse to have a bigger first move than Hex, just because there's more liquidity in the market today. And we've seen multiple coins, the few that have performed well versus ETH cycle have had bigger moves during their first move than Ethereum did during its first cycle. Hex led that like by a lot, and then there was a few others that did pretty well too. So I don't see why we can't have a bigger move than what ETH had during the first really big move. So the asymmetry to me, you know, I think Pulse is, to me, it's, I just can't really think of any other coin that has that potential upside in 2022. Like even Hex is gonna, like, Hex has very high upside in 2022, but like Pulse, because it's starting out, like it hasn't had, it's basically still a virgin on the chart. That's the way I kind of look at it. Hasn't quite popped the cherry yet with that first really big move. And if that could be a rather spectacular move we see on Pulse Chain in 2022, I am very, very, like, if I had to pick one that I think will perform exceptionally well, I do think it is going to be Pulse Chain in 2022.
And what do you think about Pulse Swap before we get back to the further bridge slides?
Yeah, so for Pulse Swap, I am going to read more into the vampire attack discussion. There's that, I don't know if you still have that Medium article from earlier in the stream, Maddie, with the vampire attack. This one I definitely want to give a read for, just for my own understanding. I haven't thought much. I just saw basically another potential coin, and one I just had an interest in because basically Richard was mentioning it on Twitter not too long ago. So I just was looking at it more for just to have the complete trifecta across the entire ecosystem. So you have the base layer asset as Pulse, you have the store of value as Hex, and then you have basically the swap token as Pulse. And I just think with what Richard is going to do, I wouldn't be surprised if it's just way better comparatively to a lot of these other swap tokens you see in the market. So I just wanted to have that investment exposure just to have the full ecosystem. So just to clarify on that, I am not going to be doing any trading between Pulse Swap, Pulse, or Hex. Like, I'm just holding on to those coins and just letting them ride. And then my only exception to that is just a small percent allocation into speculative plays that could launch on Pulse Chain, just to keep it nice and simple. And then the end goal of that is, of course, just getting more of the native assets. But if it doesn't work, then I'm basically only losing like 5% of the Pulse holdings. So, downside risk isn't that high for potential upside on potential coins or shit coins that launch on Volchain. I just like calling it for what it is. It's very refreshing being able to just be honest about it, because the Ethereum community would get very offended if you called like all the DeFi junk that's on their shit coins. It is all shit coins.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So very good characterization, very good truth. And hopefully Pulse will be a more truthful and honest place where people know what they're getting into, know what the risk is. And it'll be interesting because with Pulse, I mean, it seems like the value coming out of a sacrifice phase is probably going to be different for these two based on what rules Pulse Swap comes out with, right? Because if Pulse Swap has built in, you get a tiny fee for all the volume that happens on something.
Yeah.
Then that
Right.
could be
That
actually
could be
useful.
really
You
good.
know,
Yeah.
it's even if it's a duct taped on thing or not, either way, there is, you know, like a cash flow there that kind
Yeah.
of appeals to mainstream investors. I know.
Yeah, I agree. And for that reason, like I don't really consider, like if we were to call, you know, things like shitcoins on Pulse chain, I don't really consider something like Pulse Swap. I don't even though that's a PRC20, because it actually has utility for the coin. You know, that's where you can start to have like a lot of good attributes. Like if you start to get fees that are, you know, this is, and that's something that can evolve over time. Like in theory, if you had fees being paid out in other assets, like say you were getting paid out in fees for other PRC20s, well, if you don't want those PRC20s, you can just dump them into basically Pulse Swap, Hex. Like you have multiple options as to, or you can just hold on to them because you're just getting them for basically doing nothing other than just helping provide, you know, some of the liquidity. So there is going to be other utilities that exist in the market in the future. It's just, you know, most of the value in this ecosystem is just it's going to occur in the three assets, especially Hex and Pulse, to me, like without a doubt. Like that, those two are basically no brainers. And then, you know, just for upside potential, like I'm very excited to see what the initial size of the market around Pulse is, because, you know, again, if you take, like, since market cap doesn't, it really is a meaningless metric. It doesn't really give you good insight in terms of the upwards potential if you're just looking at the market cap itself. But if you basically take whatever the net market cap is of Pulse, and I would look at that information through, you know, one of the Hex Build's websites, because I'm not sure if you're going to get very accurate information on that with some of the controversy that's taken place with some of the ranking, some of the ranking aggregators in the market, or some of the ranking websites you see in the market. So if you take whatever the most reliable one is in the Hex community, multiply it by 10%, and that should give you a much better picture or better understanding in terms of that relative size versus other coins that exist in the market. Because I do think you are going to have, but I guess the other thing is, because you're going to have, you know, all this liquidity on Pulse Swap, you could have more liquidity, but just in practice, like, I just think that first move is going to be rather spectacular. So I do plan on buying, like I did put Hex in for the sacrifice phase, but I am going to be buying more Pulse token on top of what I get from the sacrifice within the first 60 days after launch. I'm not going to ape in a bunch like on day one. I'm just going to take whatever, you know, my net allocation is and just sort of break it up between those 60 days, keep it nice and simple, and then just have a bigger position, and then just let it ride.
I like the use case for Pulse Swap, so I'm gonna sacrifice for that.
Okay.
Maybe even by cutting back on, you know, like cutting back on expenses, man. Why not?
Yeah.
Let's see. So we've got more slides here on the topic of bridges before we wrap up the episode.
Yes. So I'm sensing you guys might be tired. Let me monologue this. I'll get you through. I would appreciate questions and comments, though, if it's not too late and if you guys are not too tired. But feel free to turn your cams off, take a nap. I'll take over from here.
Sometimes I eat when my cam is off.
Okay, cool. What are you eating, by the way?
I've got some like Cheerios in a cup.
Oh man, cutting back on expenses already. Are they honey nut or just usual?
Yeah.
Regular? Yeah. Nice.
They're fancy.
All right, so I'll get back onto the bridge conversation. So I'll summarize where we left off. We demonstrated why dynamic elements of a bridge system necessitate that we have admin keys in current known architectures. Earlier, we posited about how randomization could help us out. And we're also aware that there are academics who are developing and considering trustless, decentralized, cross-chain communication problems and trying to solve them. So that's where we are. We've also talked about how to mitigate these things. So feel free to watch the earlier part of the video for that. So one of the earlier slides, I kind of skipped over the commentary above. I made a note for individuals who were advanced to pause it and read it. And so that's essentially what we're doing in a nutshell. So what we're going to do now is actually break down what that means. I'm not going to comment on the imagery. So one of the components of what's important of the above sentence is the chain security audit. So the components that we're going to be using have been audited by chain security. You'll be familiar with Hex, hopefully, and Hex, as Richard likes to say, and as is true, has 100% uptime, flawless operation, etc. So Hex was audited by chain security, and they definitely did not hurt Hex with that audit. And I believe chain security audits are some of the best in the business. I'm not sure if that perception is held universally. However, I've read some of their audits, and they do find interesting things. So I don't have many bad things, or really any that immediately come to mind, any bad things to say about chain security. So
and if you go to allmylinks.com/allin, I link to some different audits of the hex code. I know I think there was one by Coinfabrica and by Chain Security as well. There are 3 audits, of course, so you can find those at allmylinks.com/allin.
Awesome. And now's a good time to upvote the stream, or sorry, to like the stream. It's really important.
Yeah.
So
or get out.
I also have a few call to actions on your behalf embedded in the presentation. So
perfect.
I got you, Maddie, just
Thank
in case
you.
You're too tired by the end of this.
Sounds great.
So another element of our system that has been audited by Chain Security is what's called an extension to OmniBridge. I'll discuss how that's relevant. And the base of our system is a POA or a token bridge in a particular mode, which was arbitrary message mode, which was the way we initialized the bridge mode parameter earlier in several slides back. So, and POA is just an organization. So now I'll cover what we've covered so far. So I'm referring back to my empowerment promise. Green is everything that we've done so far. Yellow is what's next. So for the remainder of the presentation, we're going to consider functional properties of the bridge. The reason that we're considering functional properties is because these are the properties that are relevant to users, which is most of the people watching right now. And then after that, we're going to consider some game theory stuff. I sort of view that as a bonus, and we will actually need your help on that. Well, we'll definitely appreciate input on that. And I plan to read through the comments and report to the relevant people what you've written. So hopefully you're paying attention. This is accessible to, this part where you can comment is accessible to most people. You don't need to be hyper technical. And you might just have an idea that would save the day. So look forward to that. So everything in red is what we're going to cover next.
So just to clarify, if all of the super smart people who are watching, if they get any ideas, you can add it to the YouTube comments, Ruth will read the YouTube comments and communicate that to the people who are implementing this with Richard Hart.
Right. So we really, really want your comments. So also, I told you there would be other CTAs, Maddie.
Awesome.
Okay.
Cool.
So, so as I said, we're going to be looking at this at a functional level. We're going to start with the token bridge first, with the arbitrary message mode token bridge first for POA, then the extension by OmniBridge, and then the UI by Omni as well. And let's get started. So we're going to look at what these things allow us to do. So the token bridge in arbitrary message mode is actually really awesome. So it has a lot of universality. And some of the implications are really cool and wild. And if you've been in the community for a while or have been listening, some of the functionality enables certain strategies that I won't name explicitly. We could consider another time. But if you're shrewd at detecting what I'm laying down, let's say, you might benefit a lot from this knowledge. So an arbitrary message bridge, as I said earlier, is highly universal. So you can think of it as an enablement that lets us move data from one chain to another. And there's no restriction on the generality of this data. By that, I mean, we don't only move ERC20s. We have the capability of moving NFTs, assuming this is implemented. I don't personally care, but some people might, so that's useful. There's interoperability when it comes to syncing state across chains with various contracts, could be useful for a vampire attack. You can propagate token prices, whatever. Yeah, I'll leave the other two there. And maybe you can Google some of those terms. We don't really need to get into them. So the next question naturally is, when is the bridge? Well, in order for it to behave the way that we want it to, we need an extension. The extension that we're going to use is an extension by OmniBridge. It's called the OmniBridge extension. And it gives us functionality at what people perceive to be a token level. There's subtle differences. So it enables contract transfers. You have your ERC20s, great, cool story, bro, whatever. ERC 677s, these are important. These are the minted versions of your ERC20s that you lock up. So these are relevant when it comes to liquidity fractionation as well, because the ERC 677s that our bridge creates, that the community bridge creates, are going to be plentiful. You're going to be able to leverage them without suffering from fractionated liquidity if everybody uses the bridge. And ERC 827s, you're better off not knowing about them. If you see one, just stay away. They can be scary. In addition to some properties, in addition to the prior stated properties of the OmniBridge extension, we have the ability to access built-in DeFi. You make yourself susceptible to things called re-entrancy attacks. Re-entrancy attacks are actually a consequence of ERC 827s as well. Won't get into that. Google it if you want. And naturally, the question is, okay, you have the extension, you have your token bridge, we should be good to go, right? So when is the bridge? Well, we need the UI. So we're using, as far as I know so far, we've got it to work. A little bit of finicky stuff to get it to work was necessary. We've got this awesome dude who just continually impresses me, and we've got a really great crew. So the OmniBridge UI at a functional level to most users really just enables you to click stuff. Like relative to the other components of the system, this is one of the easier ones that's less interesting. You can click stuff Awesome. Drop-down menus, etc. But this is the primary interface with the extension and the arbitrary bridge that most people will use. So again, when is a bridge? You can click stuff, you can move tokens, you can do other cool stuff. When's the bridge? We actually need a better question than this. In the bridge chat, there was a great question, and here it is. So, how much effort is it going to take to deploy this solution on testnet v2? The answer is none. Guy at the bottom is a badass. So, and I forgot to insert this. So, really, really awesome dude. Don't spam him. So, at the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned something in the bottom right corner of one of the earlier slides. And this is going to be a useful conceptual model for most people watching this. We know that at a high level, we've got the users in the middle, contracts between them and the chains. But how does it all work? We'll consider the left side of the screen. And in this image, Ethereum is our foreign chain. As usual, Pulse chain is our home chain. It's our home. And we'll try to answer a question of how the bridge would work. If I have Hex on Ethereum and I want to move it to Pulse chain. So without getting too in depth about the set of contracts that are necessary and the interplay, the interrelations between their behavior, we're going to use this representation in the middle for our bridge. You'll notice the lock icon in the top left. Hex will be locked into a pool on the bridge. Then the tokens will be minted on the Pulse chain as eHex. And so if you'll recall from a couple slides ago, eHex is our ERC677, and they're not all interchangeable, of course. So if you want to be able to leverage available liquidity, you should use this bridge. And if you have Hex on Pulse chain, the opposite mechanism or the preceding mechanism just in reverse applies. Now, on the Ethereum side, let's suppose you have p-hex. And the way that you would have gotten that there is seen in the above diagram. So we're looking towards the bottom left corner here in the Ethereum box, the p-hex hexagon. So if you want to move what was formerly Hex on Pulse chain, that was then bridged to Ethereum and then back again, you will do so through the bridge via a burning contract. And it'll be unlocked on Pulse chain. Sorry, I'm less interesting to listen to because I'm really tired. It's really late for me. And similarly, the reverse operation can be performed. Natural questions that might arise are like, oh, well, what if there's more p-hex on Ethereum? That doesn't really happen if you're using the same bridge, right? There's a pool where stuff is locked, and you can only unlock what was in the pool. So another reason to use a community bridge, in addition to the fact that it's audited, etc. So on the right, we'll see the Omni UI. Like I just took a screenshot and posted a funny picture of myself upside down here. This is where we're at on the UI. All the links go to the wrong places, but this is what the Omni UI enables. So at this point, you'll understand some functional properties of the bridge. And I'll actually return to the preceding slide and ask if things are unclear. Because even in the bridge chat, some devs who were looking at other aspects of the bridge had some questions in order to clarify their models of how the bridge worked. So at this point, are there any questions about how the AMB plus extension work at the functional level specifically?
Sorry, I was muted. We had Bitfinesse say, love these graphics. Don't downplay this. Wildly interesting.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, I'm not at my best in the evening. So I apologize for not giving you the best version of me, but at least it's a version of me. So really, there's no question that's too simple. I think, so the guy who created this graphic intends to have a few articles about bridging on his site. I'm hopefully going to help him write them, or maybe write some for him, or really just make myself available to him. He's been really helpful throughout this entire process. So these pretty drawings are thanks to him. Okay, so we can always revisit this. Maddie, if you happen to see any questions in the chat, I'm not looking at the chat, so if you see any questions in the chat that you might think are relevant, please let me know. So that was just an update of our empowerment promise. And now we can move on to the bonus slide. Before we get there, I do think it's important for you guys to consider whether you like the content. You can also write in the comments if you have nothing to say about the game theory slide that's coming next. If you'd like to see certain things explained about the bridge or bridges in general, or really just, I don't know, arbitrary stuff that I might be able to help with. If you like the format, if you didn't, just contribute, write stuff in the comments.
And make your comments in the replay so it shows up on the after the fact comments.
Oh,
because there are tons of like live stream comments that don't all necessarily show up later on. So
great point. So please, at the end of this video, like write down your ideas, either your commentary about the presentation or about the game theory in some separate notepad document or whatever, text pad, whatever you want to use. Come back tomorrow, paste them. And
remember that there is there are spam bots that will message you and say that they'll leave a comment under yours, and it'll look like my account, and it'll tell you to message a Telegram phone number to give you some free advice or something. That's not me. So I'm not messaging you. This has been a big problem. Where I can't even delete them all because they just go on forever. I spent like an hour yesterday trying to delete off one video. But it's great that people leave comments. So as long as people know, don't message the fake Maddie on Telegram because you left a comment in the YouTube section and there was an imposter there. But please use the comment section because that's an awesome place to share ideas. Thank you.
Similarly, I won't contact you. I'm going to read all your stuff, but I'm not going to contact you either. So awesome. All right, time for the bonus slide. If you've stuck it out this long through some of the high-level technicals, then here's some relatively accessible stuff for everyone. And hopefully we find some awesome suggestions or considerations in the comments. So this slide is just going to be, we're just going to zoom in on one particular game theoretic consideration, which are validator rewards. And some things to recall are the cost dichotomy between the foreign and home chain. And this cost dichotomy essentially forces us, if we want to be capital efficient, to move most transactions to the home chain, which awesome, great. But some of the consequences of this is that validator payouts will occur only on the Pulse chain, or at least ideally only on the Pulse chain. So that's what I mean by asymmetric payout.
Okay.
And I would love to hear if you guys think this is optimal, but I think it's necessary. It might not be optimal if the costs were the same, but I think it's necessary and optimal given that the costs are not the same. So part of this discussion involves what I've termed fair weather validators. So there's going to be a lot of activity across the bridge, and I'm hoping that on the next slide, great. So we're going to see traffic versus time in this really crappy graph. And it's essentially equivalent to fees over time. The fees are going to be great because there's going to be huge incentives to continually use this bridge because we're going to establish liquidity. But they might not be as awesome as the first little while, right? So we want to think of ways, or at least we want to explore whether it is a good idea to think of ways about how to reduce the number of fair weather validators that we have. So validators that are only sticking around for the initial traffic and that are going to leave and have negative implications. So it's also important to note that validators for a bridge, I've said this earlier, but who knows if people are still watching, change it up, etc. Validators for a bridge are different than validators for the Pulse chain network. The hardware requirements are much lower for bridge validators. So we're not going to have fair weather Pulse chain validators. We could have fair weather Pulse community bridge validators. And that'll be not that detrimental to the system. It might just be annoying. You might have to start using different ERC 677s. So whatever, it's not that big of a deal, but it leads to liquidity fractionation, which is suboptimal. So some ideas are to just like YOLO, let the validators do whatever they want, add them as necessary, let them take their fees instantaneously under this asymmetric payout model. Cool, but that gives us less control over the fair weather validator situation. Another consideration is time locking fee rewards. So if we know that we could experience a huge drop off in validators, well, then why don't we do something about it? So a couple ideas. I'm not sure if they're spread out over the next two slides or just the next one. Okay. So one thing we could do is instantly convert fees to hex on Pulse chain. And we could force them to stake. Of course, we wouldn't do this every second. We'd probably discretize the time dimensions to break it up into small parts. And then once a certain amount of fees have accrued, distribute them, lock them up. The implementation details aren't that important because they're relatively easy to figure out, but maybe you have some cool ideas, which is what we'd love to hear. And another alternative is to delegate them. So pay out the rewards, pay out the fees in Pulse, and enforce time-locked delegation. Another method as well, great for the Pulse price, etc. So there are some problems with this. If our validators can't collect rewards, then they have to show up with a big pool of ETH to pay for transactions or to facilitate transactions by paying for fees associated with transactions from the foreign network, Ethereum, to the home network, Pulse chain, right? And so these are serious comments, other than the last 2 or 3, that could put a strain on certain validators, certain bridge validators. So if we time lock, we definitely hit the delayed gratification aspect of our community, or desired trait to propagate throughout our community, but could the cost be unbearable, or would our set of bridge validators have to approach the net worth and stake parameters of the Pulse chain validators, right? So non-trivial considerations. And okay, so suppose they give us, or suppose bridge validators provide sufficient ETH to last for some period of time based on estimates. Okay, well, beyond that, users will foot the bill. Well, users are footing the bill, but the validators can't extract their small cut. We're looking at like 0.01%. And we've even talked a little bit about not charging a middleman fee whatsoever, because I think that is annoying and that kind of sucks. But is it feasible? Because validators cost money to run. Bridge validators cost money to run. So is that fair? Right? Like, are we putting an undue expectation and almost taking advantage of the goodwill of community members who decide to be bridge validators in that way? So, yeah, that's that idea in a nutshell. There's many things that we haven't considered. It's come up past few days. So we really would love exposure to your ideas. As I said, I'm not reading the comments, so the live stream comments. So I strongly recommend just putting your thoughts down in the more permanent comments of the video after the live stream is finalized. And now what I'll do is just show off and tell you that everything I promised to tell you by the end of this talk, I've told you. You know what future Bridge Bites episodes could look like. If we really want to drill down to arbitrary levels of complexity, we can.
Yes, we do.
Awesome. I think it's really important. I think it's super cool. So, and I've also left you with a relatively accessible game theory problem that I'd love to just kind of see if we could get some new ideas about. So please comment. And I think there's one more slide. We will read the comments. Make sure you're upvoting Maddie's stream at this point. I'm really curious as to whether YouTube rewards upvotes that have a really long attached watch time to them, or whether you should just upvote immediately. I suspect it's the former. There's some known issues. So me being less dumb, it's a known issue. We got to get some good people on there. There's some links if you're curious. So all of the technologies that we're using are linked. You can look at their GitHub, you can look at their code, everything associated with them. POA Token Bridge and Omni should be mono repos. The list of relevant audits are the ones that are included in the Pulse Chain Bridge repo for the associated code that's also in the repo that is used to run the bridge now. And yeah, the bridge is running now. And a link to the slides is included as well. And I'm nothing like this on Twitter. So if you want smart shit, don't go there. But if you want random funny shit, sometimes smart shit, go there if you want. And that should be the end of the presentation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
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 Perfect. Well, we've been going for about 3 hours and 40 minutes here and had a really productive discussion between all of us. So thanks guys for being on.
Yeah, anytime. I think it's really important to, so right now I would say that the way most users think of bridges is the way that most users think about mittens. You put your hand into a mitten, but we really need to change the way they think to a glove. So you think about where you're putting your fingers, and you have a slightly more specialized model of how to view bridges, and this would be a great spot to do that and leave it up for posterity so that we can all benefit.
Perfect.
And if you guys have random questions, I'm happy to field them. So let me know. I don't know how late these guys tend to stay up, but I'm caffeinated. I'm Adderalled up. So if you have any bridge questions, let me know.
Awesome. Yeah. And Bitfinesse had some good questions here that we'll try to get to in the next stream, because this is going to be an ongoing series to say, so the bridge validator is taking the place of a perfect world smart contract for liquidity. I'm just going to make some notes of this because we can, I think these questions deserve like kind of a longer answer that we don't have time for now, but we'll look forward to this, you know, this part of QuantGang as it continues. And also Wave3TV, thanks for being on. What do you want to show?
I would say, yeah, check out the stream later. I think we're gonna be streaming on Thursday this week. We're still coordinating basically some of the stream days. So I guess just keep a lookout on Twitter. There's the Nights of Crypto on Wednesday. That's worth checking out. I believe that is rotating into my channel this week. I believe it's my turn to host that. So Nights of Crypto, Nights of Crypto tomorrow at 7, and then more.
That's one of my favorite shows. I love that show.
Yeah,
thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thanks for everything you're doing there.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody needs to go and subscribe to Wave3TV on YouTube now, and catch Nights of the Crypto Roundtable on Wednesday, and then he and I will be streaming on Thursday, probably before Hex Therapy on whatever channel we're going to be on. So that'll be really cool. Awesome. Well, thanks to everybody who tuned in today, and we'll be looking forward to your comments here. Remember, don't believe the scammers. And for now, stake wisely, my friends. Peace out.